Hey everybody, it's Monday, and today's awesome person is Mr. Jack Joseph Puig. Hey Jack, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Good, good, thanks. Joining us from an incredible looking room in your abode. So this is the Puig Child. It's called Puig Child Studios, is that right?
Yeah, I called it Quick Child Studios, correct.
And this is what percentage of the gear that you had at Ocean Way, etc. For so long? Did you get pretty much everything into this room?
Yeah, most of it is here. The only difference between here and there would be just the fact that we don't work the same way,
Yeah.
right? So, um, Ocean Way was literally pretty much, well, let me rephrase that statement. And it was an analog room for sure, but I did embrace digital Pro Tools absolutely right out of the box. I had immediately two screens, one for my assistant because he was by the patch bay,
Yeah.
and one for me. So we had mirrored screens from, I can't remember, from the very, 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 very beginning. Uh, it's too great of a tool.
Yeah. Well, I
And
think we actually met. I think the first time we met is me coming in to do some editing for you on Warning while you were mixing that.
yes, because there was another gentleman whose name will come to me in a minute. I almost have it. That actually did the editing actually on Forewarning. So the prior record, right? The Dookie and a few other ones. What was his name?
I
I
can't
almost have
remember.
it. He
It'll
was like
come.
considered like back then, he was considered like the Pro Tools guy.
It
Um,
wasn't Tal, was it? It.
no, no, this was, I want to say McMurphy, Murphy. I almost have it.
It'll come. It'll come.
It'll come. Yeah. Because back at that point, you had Pro Tools was so early, you had these like Pro Tool guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know it
Um,
well.
as you know, from your New England days.
Well, so let's go back all the way to the beginning though, because that's the way we do things here. So you
Sure.
started off as a child, as did pretty much everybody I talked to, which is a good starting point. But it's always really interesting to see what the path in was for people because it's such a for the people who do this and are interested in it, it's like it's our entire universe. But for the rest of the universe, it's this weird dark sliver that doesn't even make any sense. And to sort of discover it and decide that's going to be your thing. So, from what I know, you were really into music and also into electronics from a pretty early age. Is that right?
My father was a television repairman, and I earned my car in high school by repairing record players and radios and things of that sort.
Right.
And so I just grew up around electronics because of him. I, was the left school and then I would come home. Instead of going home, I would go to my dad's TV shop and help him out. And of course, I worked weekends with him.
Right.
So that was the beginning. And then I got my first bass, became a bass player, which is very common for a lot of us. A lot of us are bass players.
Bass and
Um,
trumpet seem to be the two main instruments.
yeah, it's a really odd thing,
Yeah.
but I noticed it a lot. And then from there, I went on.
And so, what music were you listening to then, sort of high school? Like, what were the bands you loved at that point?
Well, I love Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I understood the brilliance of the Beatles, and but they were a little too poppy for me, a little bit too light. It
Yep.
wasn't until later on, as I became a record maker, that I was able to actually appreciate really what those records were, and actually how much they were the blueprint to this day for a lot of what people do in pop record making.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, but you were in the Zeppelin camp, so little Hendrix in there too, some Who, that kind of like the what would now be considered the classic rock.
Yes,
And
yeah. I was also I'm generally people don't like to admit this, but I was also a fanatic for the Doors,
right,
and I always really liked Jim Morrison tremendously. I liked everything about him, and I liked their music. And actually, they have a very unique thing. The Doors. You'll see it with Grohl, and you'll see it with a song called "Sex and Candy" is another good example, and the Doors. And actually had an interesting experience where I was going to meet the producer, Paul Rothschild, on a Wednesday night, and he passed away on a Wednesday. So I didn't get to meet him. But why I wanted to meet him was I wanted to ask him if it was on purpose and what led them to it. And I never got the answer. I've only been able to surmise what I think it is that makes one thing that's unique about the Doors, which I've used in my record making as far as a record producer. And that is, traditionally speaking, right, it's not uncommon, and I would say it's very common, that you have hi-hat in the verse and cymbal rides or cymbal work
right
in the chorus.
Something a little more open.
Generally speaking, the Doors do exactly the opposite. And when I met Ray Manzarek at his home through a friend, I asked him that question. And he looked at me and said, "What are you talking about?" And just as I said that, there was a knock at the door, and it was somebody from Warner Brothers who had brought to him to listen to the best of the Doors. So I looked at him and said, "Pop it in. Just needle drop right now." And so he said, "Okay." So he popped it into his player and needle dropped and looked at me and said, "Oh my God, you're right." I said, "Look, I only have two theories. One, Dunsmore, the drummer, is a jazzer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of surf music, jazz to kind of do that.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think it actually is that Jim Morris's lyrics meant so much in the verse. And it wasn't a big deal. The lyrics, of course, were not a big deal. It was all about the verse because he was a poet. So if you're up on the cymbal writing, there's a lot of room for the vocal. It's very clear to hear the vocal, to hear the diction, the feeling, the mood, the attitude, the perspective, the personality, the character, all the things that tell the story beautifully. And when you get to the chorus, if you're sloshing hard, then you have that pelvic attitude that actually he wasn't really providing because he was mystery. He was more of a mystery person. I'm not sure why we're off on this tangent.
Well, why not? Why not? It's fascinating.
I just thought it was really interesting to me, and I tried it, and it really works.
Yeah, well, I mean, because if you think about it, especially like as thinking about the Doors, their verses are more jazzy, and they become a rock band in the chorus, as opposed to the small, tight version of the chorus with different chords that then explodes into the chorus. It is a really different kind of songwriting approach, and they're divisive. I got to say, I was a fan as a kid because my parents had Strange Days and one other one, I can't remember what it was. And then I kind of got to the point where I didn't like them at all. And then I re-listened to a bunch before I talked to Bruce Botnick a couple weeks ago, and was kind of blown away with how great a lot of it is. There's still some that I don't like, but a lot of it is kind of ridiculously good. And again, Jim, but all of them. Yeah, the way the arrangements are put together and how different the stuff is too.
You know what made me go back to it is when I worked with Stone Temple Pilots, there were two people that Dean in particular, well, the two brothers, the bass player and guitar player, they really admired two people.
What, Jimmy Page?
Glenn Campbell.
Oh, really? Okay. Wow.
Glenn Campbell was like God to them. And Robbie Krieger, the guitar player in the Doors. And I was like, Robbie Krieger, like I always think of Jim Morrison. I always think about his lyrics. I think about him. I think about the movie Riders on the Storm. I don't think about the guitar that much.
Right.
So I went back and listened. I was like, holy shit, they're right. This guy really did some unique stuff.
Yeah, the DeLeos are massive students of it all. I did a record that they were producing, and at that point, Dean was in a serious Jimmy Page thing and was like recreating setups and just like, so into it and just such a huge fan. Well, so going back to being a fan, so you get a bass, you've been listening to all this music, so presumably you join a band, and are you playing covers, or this is a high school cover band? Like, what are you doing with your bass that eventually gets you into a studio, which is where it all begins?
We're playing, exactly. That's exactly what happens. We're playing covers and some of our own material. And we ended up in a studio to do a demo like most people. And there was an issue technically. And I just, walked in the control room and I was watching them trying to solve it. And it was easy for me to solve. And that's when I realized, you're never going to be like an unbelievable bass player. You'll be okay. You're never going to be like stunning. And I'm on the other side of the class, and it's natural, and it's easy, and it makes sense. I think I'm on the wrong side of the glass. And I switched.
And did you have a sense of that side of the glass before you went in, having already been into sort of electronics and listening to a lot of music, or was that just a complete mystery until you stepped in there?
Complete mystery. I had no idea. I mean, look, when you first walk into a studio, every light is twice as bright, everything is twice as big. It's, people are 5 times bigger than they really are. I mean, it's just, you're blown away if it's something that really pushes your button.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, well, that takes us to you in the studio. So this is still in high school, and you just decided this is what I've got to do. Is that pretty much what happened?
College.
That was college. Okay.
I'm not in late college. I got started pretty late.
Well, college isn't that late. It's still earlier than, So what did you go to college to study? What were you doing?
I wanted to teach music and electronics because there's a correlation between the two. If you reduce it to numbers, for lack of a better description. And that's a very unsexy statement, but true.
It's all math at one point.
It is. It really is. Now you see that with certain plugins, right? This note equals this frequency, etc. Yeah. So anyway, that is how it transpired.
And did you finish up at college and then kind of check something out and find a studio, or how did you end up getting into a studio? Or did you just that's it, turn on a dime?
It's the same old crazy thing where I was dating a girl at the time, and her father was good friends with an engineer that was working in a studio called Whitney Studio in Glen Oaks in Glendale, California. That studio is where all of the Love Unlimited, Barry White, lots of those kinds of records were being done, and Christian records were being done there in the very beginning of Christian music. And I told him that that's something I really wanted to do because I already had the experience. I spoke to you about earlier in the studio. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'll call the guy. Frank Kamar was his name. I'll call the guy and see. And so I'm in her bedroom talking to this guy, and he's like, it's really hard. It's difficult to get in the business. I don't know, I don't really have any ideas, etc. And crazy enough, I started praying. And when I started praying, I didn't even hear him anymore because I was just in my own space. And when I finished, the next thing I heard was, okay, you know what? Maybe you are the right guy. Can you come down tomorrow and meet Mr. Whitney?
I love that what made you the right guy was basically ignoring him as well. I mean, you were gainfully employed at the time, but you're doing something important in your own mind. But I love that you basically ignored the guy and you're like, all right, he's the man, because you could sit and you could listen.
Correct.
So that was it.
And that's a real lesson.
So you went down the next day and started off as an assistant or a runner, or?
No, I started off doing a little bit of everything, but not running. Primarily taking care of some of the equipment because I had a little bit of that technical background. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, I was able to sort of figure things out. Because basically, when you understand audio, it's kind of the same thing. It's just different stages put together in different ways. So if you have any kind of brain where you can logically think about things, you can figure out where the problem can probably be and how to rectify it. But that only lasted for a period of time. And it was an amazing studio. In fact, that's where the Knack made their records. Very famous producer worked there, a guy named Mickey Most.
Yeah.
And another guy made records there. So I got to watch how those records were made. Exile and some of those records. Wow. And that was in one room. And then the other room, you had Barry White, Love Unlimited Orchestra, which was, 60 pieces all going down, 5 guitar players on the floor.
Wow.
And harpsichord and piano and strings and horns and 2 drummers. And it was insane to watch. So I had 2 completely different experiences, because that was think about how to say this now in this world where you have to be very careful what you say. I know what I would normally have said, but not to be careful. I guess I would say that was the real deal, meaning that when Barry came, there were 3 guards, and they literally had 357 Magnum guns that they would literally put on the console, and they were like huge. And if you even looked at them wrong, they would break you in half.
Right.
And they did shoot people, and they get put in jail. And I saw all that, but for real, real stuff, not the pretend that we see now, actual real. That was the real thing. And then you'd walk into the other studio, and there you were with, British people and guitars and chicks and cocaine and drugs and crazy. It was all the way white and black, completely opposite of each other.
And sharing the
Totally
parking lot.
different worlds. Yeah, it was really an interesting experience.
It's funny because, a lot of studios, maybe they weren't as diverse as that necessarily, but there was this sort of thing. It didn't matter if you had absolutely nothing in common with the other people working in the studio, because you're all working at the same studio. And, you're sharing all the common rooms, and none of this kind of weird, this is my space, no one come in here and all that. So that's funny. But what an amazing sort of first thing to see. Because Mickey Most, I don't know if he's that well known in the States or not, but here, he built Rack Studios and was really one of the kind of fathers of the sort of one level down from Aaron Abbey Road kind of thing, like rock and roll studios. Let's just go get dirty and make a bunch of records, and really, really important figure. And then obviously what's going on in the other room is...
I worked at Rack 3 times. It was a great studio.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the
really
few
good.
Still going, and it's still pretty much as it was. So, fingers crossed it'll stick around for a bit longer. So that's an amazing way to start. And then how long before you got into the control room then?
I got in the control room a little bit, of course, on weekends or evenings. I pretty much lived there, right? That was it. I was there till wee hours of the evening every day. Nothing else mattered. I didn't care. I was obsessed.
Right.
And I was obsessed with wanting to learn every aspect of it. This is also in a different kind of era of where, I don't know how else to say this other than say it kind of crudely, where you had people that were kind of you were kind of like hot dogs. You had to be really good at what you did. And it was always operating on this A level. And you wanted to never be the guy that made a mistake.
Yeah.
And everybody came in just neurotic, nervous, but ready to kill. And extremely, extremely good at what they did. Phenomenal. So if I was to recall the 4 guitar players, for instance, that were on the Barry White session, they all went off to be rock stars on their own. But there were 4 of them all. Look at them, be that's so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so on one session? What? And that was just the level.
Right. Well, and that was the level kind of everywhere back then. It's amazing how many, all of Led Zeppelin were session musicians. That's one of my favorite trivia questions is the band on the Donovan track. I'm looking over at my wife because now I'm spacing on the name of it. Hurdy-Gurdy Man is basically Led Zeppelin and Alan Holdsworth. Because that's who was playing sessions.
It was the same thing with, that's right. It was the same thing with Peter Frampton. He was a session player. Effectively, they were the first Toto.
Right.
Basically. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
They were the first Toto.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what Toto was, right? And they were all ridiculously musicians that played, they heard the song once and then 2 performances, okay, what else we're going to do?
Yeah, well, and Wrecking Crew. All those sort of groups of musicians who either would come with the studio or were just in a spot. Or it's kind of amazing how prevalent that was and how it sort of completely disappeared as well.
Yeah, I missed that aspect of my career at this point only because it was fun. It was really fun. Because the way I look at it, sometimes I play wiffle ball, softball, t-ball, and sometimes I play hardball. So if you're in the control room with people who've made, say like the Rolling Stones, who've made 20, 30 records, they know what they're doing. And you better be able to you better be able to play ball. Because they'll know whether you know what you're doing or not, because they actually know what they're doing. They've already gone through it so many times.
Yeah.
They actually know what they're doing. And so there's a nervous energy and excitement about that, of knowing that you're in the room and you got to have your A game.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's neurotic, but fun.
It's definitely an adrenaline boost. Because also, when you talk about you didn't want to be the person to make a mistake, the mistakes would be that you'd be erasing things or not capturing something in the first place. It wasn't like, oh, well, we'll edit that. We'll do some of those mistakes are pretty hard to recover from.
I remember being on a Boz Scaggs session, and this is a little bit opposite of what we're talking about in a sense. And there was this one song and note that I was assisting. I was the assistant engineer in this session, and they could not, for the life of them, get this track. They kept going over and over, and this was very unusual because it was all the very top musicians. And the drummer in that session was Jeff Carl.
Yeah.
And they kept trying, and kept trying, and kept trying, and kept trying. And so finally they do another take, and it's working. And you could feel in the room where everyone's looking at each other like, don't touch anything, don't do anything. Here she comes. Just grab the butterfly. It's right in front of us. And you could just tell every musician's I'm not going to make a mistake. I'm not going to go to the wrong chord. I'm not going to blow it. I'm going to keep it together. You hit the bridge, and the bridge was a cross stick on beats 2 and 4, typical thing. And when Jeff Crow went to hit the first beat 2 of that bar, of that bridge, he kind of missed the snare a little bit, and it went clock. It kind of made a weird sound. And at that exact moment, it went clock, and he looked up, and I looked at him, and he had this big smile on his face. And I went to beat 4, he went clock again, and he clocked it all the way through that bridge. I meant to do it. Because he knew that if he didn't, it would interrupt the others. And that's the kind of level of professionalism that's wow.
That's amazing.
I want to be like that. I want to be like that. And that's the kind of thing that's driven me my whole career, of really wanting to understand every aspect of it and try to be good at it, and really care and be good at it.
Yeah.
Be proud.
Amazing. So when did you move from Whitney's over to Martin Sound?
When a guy I met said they're looking for someone over there. If you go there, you could do a lot of engineering,
right,
as opposed to being an assistant. But they make Christian records. So that began Amy Grant and a bunch of those kinds of artists for me.
Right.
And so which was great, right? They were pretty much low pressure sessions compared to other sessions I just described. That were
fewer guns, anyway.
Yeah, lower guns. I mean, they were still hiring those kind of studio musicians, but it was a great place to learn, because you could make mistakes and get away with it. Where in the other situation, you don't make mistakes. They look at you like you're a moron. Make mistakes.
Right.
But there I could get away with it. And I really got to learn a lot in that environment.
And so this is what, early 80s at this point? Oh.
This is like 87.
Oh, right. So that far on.
Because
I was going through your discography, and you've got an engineering credit on Irene Cara, What a Feeling. And that's 82.
Well, because I'll tell you why I have that credit. This has happened to me. It happened to me with her. It happened with John Cougar. I mean, I'd have to think about it. Even John Mayer, I think I could put him in that category. This is probably about 10. I'd have to think about it. Where people were having trouble and they couldn't figure out how to make it work. And because I have really good teachers and grew up the way I just described, a lot of people be like, put Jack in. He can hit a softball. I mean, he's really good at hitting hard balls, and if you throw him a curve, he'll figure it out. Put him in, see if you can get it. So no one could record her voice successfully in that song because her throat was very mid-rangey and it was hard to get. And I was able to do it through, because my brain at that point, I'm thinking about, who says I can't use 2 compressors? Who says I can't use 3? Who says I can't do this? Who says I can't use this mic?
Right.
Who says I can't use 2 mics? My mind was like, who says I can't do that? I didn't have limitations because I hadn't come from the old school. I was more of the new school. And that allowed me to sort of break the rules that those guys wouldn't break, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And it needed to be broken because it was an odd scenario.
And that's probably...
And so I recorded the vocal. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Well, and that's kind of a big part of that song. So that's pretty good. We need to talk about, because you mentioned a couple of times your mentors. I mean, you've got 3 like really specific mentors. So I'd love to hear, we'll start with Bill Schnee, hear how you ended up working with him and what he meant to you and that. Because, I mean, he's obviously one of the pillars of the engineering, period.
Well, I met him through the guy who helped me get the job at Martin Sound, who was also a very good friend of his. And he introduced me to Bill. And Bill and I immediately had a liking. We just got along. And so he started taking me to sessions that he was doing as a record producer. And I would just hang out and I got to watch. And he was, in the 70s, I think he was considered like one of the top guys. In fact, our earlier conversation about Bob Clearmountain, Bob worshipped Bill. Even Al Schmidt worships Bill. I mean, Glyn Johns they all worshipped Bill. Because Bill had 2 things. He had excellent sense of balance, which is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the most important thing, period. And I remember the day he said to me, if you can't balance, you'll never be successful, period. Now, this is a guy who came from the golden age of hi-fi recording in Los Angeles, where you listen to every wire, every screw, every nut, every connector, gold versus silver. How long is the wire? Oh, does the patch cord go like this? Oh, no, turn it around the other way. It sounds better. Okay, put a red for the in. I mean, the insanity of chasing tone. But he could also balance. And that's what made him respected by a lot of people. And then he's part of the argument, is he the first one to put a microphone on bass drum? And the Richie Podler guys who did I cannot think of the band that they did, besides Steppenwolf. Anyway, they would argue, no, I did bass drum first. No, I did bass drum first. So they were like very early pioneers, of the next level, breaking the rules, right? So you had all the sort of British people we think of, the very famous British, and then you had these American guys. And then you have the Clearmountain Hugh Pageant era, right? And I came after that. So I was like 4th. But because I loved it so much, I wanted to learn from Glyn Johns. A lot of people's hero of rock, as far as rock records.
Absolutely.
Hero. And I did 9 albums with him.
Well, so before we get on to Glyn, though, so did you ever actually make records with Bill, or were you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought so.
I made records with Bill, and I mixed a Huey Lewis record because he got lost in it, and he said, "I want you to mix it." And I was like, "What are you talking about? You're like Bill Schnee." He said, "I want you to do it." So he would watch over my shoulder and help me, and I think that's where I learned a tremendous amount, because sometimes you have to be thrown in the fire,
Yeah.
And yet he was there. So.
And did Bill have his studio at that point?
Exact things. Yes.
He did.
It's the very beginning of his studio.
Right. which is one of the best sounding live rooms I've ever recorded in. Absolutely amazing.
100%. 100%. It had the input of so many people. So Bill was so respected in the engineering community that I don't even know what names to pick. George Massenberg's, I mean, people that actually really know what they're doing would come and give input. Try this, try that. Oh, such and such studio. Remember RCA in New York? Yeah, I remember that studio. Well, RCA in New York, they did this and they did that. And I remember, yeah, you should try that. Okay, let's try that. And that's how it was built.
Right.
It was built with a lot of input from real talented people.
Well, and also I love that you talked about him, listening to Wire and the extent he would go to, because I mean, when finally that room became part of Larrabee, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that now?
Something like that.
I mean, his console still wasn't done because he never decided which output. I think it was the output amps or the output transformers, one of the two. He never decided like what the two bus was going to be. And that's just amazing to have a career like that, and still you never get to the end. You're never getting to the end.
I think there was a percentage of completion anxiety from the perspective that, once someone teaches you to think like that, in other words, like I was sent off to pick the faders. So I went to a studio called Mama Joe's in the Valley, and they had every kind of fader you could imagine set up, right? And of course, when you analyze something like that, there are a few rules, one of which is you have to have a mono source. You can't have two speakers, it's got to be one speaker. You have to have a certain kind of amplifier, a certain kind of microphone, and then you have to go through different steps of how you analyze that, right? And once you start to get taught like that by these kinds of people, these people who make the disc records, the Doug Saxes and the mastering people and all that, what happens is it's hard to stop because there's always that what if. Wait, maybe did we check this? Well, no, we checked this kind of connector and this kind of connector. Yeah, but did you check Nutrix? Maybe that's a better sounding connector. No, well, I don't think so because they don't. Well, why silver versus gold? What about platinum? And it just keeps going.
Right.
And so you just never really end because you're always searching for the greatest thing it can be.
And
which
so
is the problem.
So did Bill introduce you to Glyn?
Yes, because Glyn needed an engineer in America. And both Bill Schnee and a guy named Doug Sachs, who had a place called the Mastering Lab, recommended me. And that's how I met Glyn.
Amazing.
And it was scary as hell.
So what was your first project with Glyn?
I was wondering if you were going to ask me that. What was my first project?
If you don't remember, it doesn't matter.
I think it was a band. It was a band on MCA. And I remember it was in Ocean Way A that we recorded. And I had all my racks of gear set up. And he walked in and he looked at me and he said, "Well, what is all that stuff?" I said, "Well, it's my gear." He goes, "No, that's not how you make rock records." And he looked at the assets and he said, "All that shit out now, out in the hallway. Get that shit the hell out of here." And I was just like, that's my first experience. And then the same thing happened where when the drums turned up earlier that day, they were just like coming out of a Remo box. Like they were brand new. So guys opening up these Remo cases and these boxes and taking drums out and he's setting them up. And I listened to him like, that's not going to work. Like they're just kind of stock, okay drums. I had been spoiled, working with the Jim Keltners and the Jeff Picaros of the world that had Singerlins and Ludwigs and Camco snare drums and this kind of drum and that kind of drum. And I learned all the drums like you would learn about guitars or keyboards or synths or whatever, right? And so I called the drum doctor, I'm sure that you're familiar with, and said, "Hey, bring me down this set, this, and that." So he did it all. Same thing happened. Glenn walked in, he goes, "Who's that Wally?" I go, "That's the drum doctor. He brought some really great drums." No. Do you think I told Bonham what drums he was going to play? Bonham made the sound on his drum kit. So get that shit out of here. And I don't know what the hell you're thinking. The drummer will make the sound. You don't make the sound. You don't bring the drum kit. Okay. And it was constantly like that. So all the things that I had grown up learning in the Los Angeles, Hollywood recording thing I've been describing, he was all the way the other way. Simplistic, and very much driven by instinct.
Right. Amazing.
So there's the story I've told ad nauseum, but I'll just tell it because it sort of applies to this to bring this home. It's working on John Hyatt album with him and doing what we all do with an SM57 and a pair of headphones, of listening to the speaker and moving the microphone around, finding what I think the sweet spot is. And I did that because I wanted to impress him. And then he said, "Are you done?" I said, yeah. And we went in the control room and everybody was there, all the musicians. He goes, "That really sounds great. Now I want to teach you something." Okay. And we walk out and he looks at me straight in my face, takes his leg, and knocks the microphone down. He goes, "You spent 30 minutes adjusting that microphone. I want you to grab that microphone right now. And with your instinct, I want you to place that microphone where you think it's supposed to be. I don't want any shit with the headphones. You put the microphone where you think it's." And I said, "Well, why would I do that?" He goes, "Because lesson one, rock and roll is not precious. It's not technical. It's pelvic. It's emotion. Grab the microphone, place it properly." I did it, and it actually was better. So he kicked my ass.
That's some tough love.
Really good. Yeah.
I mean, and it's got to be
Very talented. And that guy could balance.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember he did Benmont Tench's solo record, and I think I'm repeating myself now because I talked about this a different week, but just talking about the balance, there was a song that they were working on and he was mixing, and Benmont came in and said, "Oh, it sounds absolutely amazing, but I feel like maybe we could use a little more bass." And so Glyn just reached over and pulled all the faders down. Like, "All right, give me 10 minutes. And it's like, what do you do? It was amazing. Just a little more. It's like, I can't just turn up the bass, because that's what the balance is. You got to rebalance it. If the bass is going to be louder, you can't just turn something up. And
Correct.
It's a really bold way of thinking, but I he doesn't feel like it's bold. That's just what it is. And it's pretty incredible.
Well, when I had my first opportunity to work with the Rolling Stones, that happened to me where it was on a Friday and I pulled the song up. And Andrew, it was everywhere. I mean, I'm listening to it thinking, this has to be Pro Tooled. I mean, it's just like, this shit ain't locked. Like, I can't, no way. This is way too loose. I know it's the Rolling Stones, but like, no. And then I heard his voice in my head. Pull all the faders down. Rebalance it. There's a place where it works. Damn if he wasn't right.
Yeah.
Pulled it all down, went like this, boom, boom, and it was just like, that's the Rolling Stones. Like, it all made sense. Even though it was raggeded, it all made sense.
Yeah.
This is the beauty. The one beauty about working with lots of different people is when you're mixing, it's really 50 people mixing. So I'll be doing something and I'll be like, yep, I remember when Steve Lillywhite said to me, "Dude, if there's a guitar solo, turn it up. What are you doing? It's the guitar solo." So every time the guitar solo comes, it's Lillywhite in my head, or it's Glyn Johns in my head, or record people, presidents of record companies that came and said things that didn't make sense, or artists, or vocal sounds that I now make because of Stefani, because Gwen Stefani described to me like how she wanted it. And I was like, how would I do that? And so it's so fantastic that once you've had the experience of working with all these different kinds of people, if you're got your ego checked and you let that come into you, now you got 50 people mixing it. Not you. You got 50 people that are talented people that are smart. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Jack, we lost your video, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we've got your audio, which is good.
Let me see what's going on.
But you look way better than me, so we can't have it just be me. Oh, there it is.
You got?
Yeah.
We're back?
You're back.
All right. Sorry, but I don't know why I did that.
No, I love that because I do the exact same thing. Like you remember really specific things that people have said, and it just like for me with guitar solos, it was always turn the bass up during the guitar solo because you lose rhythm guitars, and the bass player's usually playing his coolest stuff during the guitar solo, so support it. And every single time I'm mixing a song, I think about whether or not I should turn the bass up in the guitar solo. And I don't even remember who said that.
It's weird.
But
It's those moments that are, that basically rewire the synapses of your brain. And it makes such an indelible effect on you that it's like permanent. Boom. You just never forget it.
yeah.
And I would bore these people. I could go through 50 of those, of things experiences I remember from different people.
Well, let's move on to your third mentor, who, I mean, it's a pretty diverse group of mentors, actually, but Arif Mardin, who's obviously another just pillar of the record business, but in completely different ways than the other two. So you want to just talk a little bit about, first of all, why you would want to have been mentored by him after Bill and Glyn, and then also how it came about and what you ended up getting out of it.
Because he was, fairly successful in the 80s. So I learned a lot about 60s from Glyn and a lot from 70s from Bill. And I wanted to learn about the 80s. And that was really the beginning of a lot of things being very keyboard driven, a lot of programming. It was entire different way of record making, drum machines, etc. It was just so different from Bill and Glyn's time when they were really on their game.
Mm-hmm.
And Glyn Arif was an arranger at heart.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn about arranging, and I wanted to learn more about production, and I wanted to learn more about how to talk to musicians and how to work in that way. And he was a master, not only with musicians, but with artists. And I think one of my favorite things to remember about him was being at Conway Studios on the Knee VR console, mixing a Bette Midler record. And there was one song on Bette Midler, this one particular album, I could never get it right. I don't know how many times I threw that thing up, because this is pre-Pro Tools. I must have thrown balances up probably 50 times. I could never get it. And he was sitting to the left of me. He was writing a string chart because we were doing a string session that evening. And I thought he wasn't paying attention, but as we all know, great record producer is paying attention every second. Where everybody is, what's going on, what they're wearing, what they're thinking, what they're sensing, what they're feeling. Nothing is going past you. Absolutely nothing. Not even how many times they took a sip out of the drink. You're watching everything, and you're running the whole show, but nobody knows you're running it. If you're a really great record producer, no one has any clue that you're running the session. It's because it's just smooth. And he was the perfect example of that. So he's sitting to the left of me. I think he's not paying attention. And I hit stop and kind of push my chair back, a little frustrated. He goes, I know what the problem is. And I just looked at him like, yeah. He goes, it needs a 1K instrument. We're going to overdub a zither. It needs a 1K instrument. And that was when my mind just went kaboom. Because I never thought of it that way. Okay, so basically I'm mixing and EQing, but what I'm really doing is voicing. I'm voicing the chords. So now I need to look at this console like it's a piano. And there's a tambourine, and there's a shaker, and there's a voice, and there's the bass, and there's a low synth, and there's this, and there's that. And I'm arranging it. And the frequencies. And 440 is A. And, oh, okay, so that's the frequencies. Okay, so maybe that's why Spectrasonics picks that frequency. Because why does Neve pick 220 and 110? But why does SSL pick? And all of a sudden, all the gears now I understand why they're picking the frequencies they're picking, and how it's working, and why it does what it does, and how it relates to music and to keys. Bada boom.
Right.
Explosion. Whole life changed after that. I don't know if any of that makes sense the way I kind
Yeah,
of
no,
put
of course, and
it.
it makes sense too. Him just like there's just a hole. There's a hole in the song, and there's no way you can work your way around it because it's leaving a hole in the voicings. So that's amazing.
Correct. And when you talk about the hole, the frequency that where there's generally a lot of holes, basically, are 300 to 900, and because people are afraid of that area, and I understand it, and I'll never forget the day I was with Bob Ludwig, mastering the record. He said to me, "I'm going to put a little 700 in this, but I'm going to be very careful." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, 700 is the potent frequency. That's dangerous, potent." I was like, "Holy shit, he's right. I thought of it that way." And then there's people that you and I both know that own that area, own 400 to 700, 900, 800, they're really good in that area. And that area is so important for something to work on lots of systems. It's really important. I think the obsession of 10 hertz and 20 hertz is stupid. You want to master that. You want to master the mid-range.
Yeah.
And that includes all the way up to 5K. That is what separates the men from the boys, not 25K and 2 hertz. I don't separate the boys.
Though, you can get some
My opinion.
rock at 2 hertz. You'll never hear it, but boy, oh boy, it'll mess everything else up. Man.
Yes, it will.
So, all right. So we've got your 3 mentors. We've got the first 2 studios you worked at. So at what point did you just become fully freelance and really kind of get going as as Jack Joseph Puig?
I would say that, probably what changed my life the most probably was Jellyfish. The 2 records I did with them, because they became records that were so loved by the music community, without a shadow of a doubt. And then because of that, came the Black Crowes.
Right. But you had to get to the point where you got the Jellyfish gig. So there's got to be a little something in there, right?
That's because I was lucky to have the support of people like Bill Schnee, Glyn Johns, even recording for Elliot Shiner. I don't know what the hell I did. Me in a room with Elliot Shiner, the Steely Dan guy? Me? I mean, that guy can record. And he's like, "Can you come in? I want you to record these tracks for me." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're Elliot Shiner." So the point of that is having the Elliot Shiners, the Armin Steiners, the Bill Schnees, I can't think of them all. These people that are just like Gus Dungeon.
Right.
Walking in and saying, "You're one of the best engineers ever." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're like Gus Dungeon. Like, I shouldn't even be in the same breathing space as you." For real. I really mean that. And when you have that kind of people behind you, you can move pretty quick. And so Albie Galutin, who was a producer for the Bee Gees, and they were having, as you know, one hit after another. They used to bet in the control room how long it would take a number 1. They'd be like, "Okay, $5,000, Islands in the Stream is number 1 in 3 weeks. Screw you, I give it 2 weeks. Okay, another $5,000, I see you," because they had so much money. Okay, well, and they went on and on. Well, Staying Alive is going to do this and this and that, blah, blah, blah. He was asked to produce Jellyfish initially. And people like the names I just mentioned, because I had the Total guys respected me. I was working on a Kenny Loggins record at the time. And I just had a lot of people who believed in me. I was very, very fortunate. And so they said to Albie, "This guy, we want to use him." And in fact, there's even podcasts with the band where they're like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, "Well, we can let him in." And Albie said, "He's come highly recommended." "Yeah, but who is he? He hasn't done anything." So I got lucky.
That's amazing.
And also lucky that they were very talented musicians, incredible songs, and we had time. So that meant a guitar could take a week. That was okay.
Right.
One entire week working on one guitar.
Amazing.
It could not.
I think I want to go back just for a second though, and talk about Kenny Loggins, because I worked on a Kenny Loggins record as well, and I think that people know him as an artist, and but I don't think people understand how much that guy puts into making his records. It's insane how meticulous and how much of the record making process he's involved in. He's not showing up. I mean, he's as good as a producer on every single session on every record he's ever made, and you learn a ton on those sessions.
100%.
So
I think that's why, do I dare say this? I think it's why some people in our business go through multiple marriages, because, as I've said before, this becomes the other woman. And he was so obsessed with every part of the record that he just was one of those persons that when he went in, it would take forever. And he would just drill down, like you're saying, like crazy.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked with him, he owned a Mitsubishi X86 32 track that he brought with him to sessions with all of his tapes. He just had a U-Haul that showed up at every studio he was going to work at because he didn't want to trust the studio to have one. He didn't want to rent one. He needed to know the machine, and yeah. So it's a good pedigree. I mean, you say it, and it almost feels like throwaway. Oh, working on a Kenny Loggins record, but that was school. That was advanced record making school.
Well, I got to work with Jim Messina, and that's where he learned. So I worked on a couple of Jim Messina solo albums in Santa Barbara at his studio.
Right.
And that is where I learned. That's where I learned about 1176s in a different way. And it's where I learned about what is the Eventide?
The H3000. Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
No, Omnipressor.
Yes.
He taught me the Omnipressor.
Which is a very difficult box to learn properly.
Yes. But when it comes to a Telecaster or Strat, if you want the Burton sound, James Burton. So Susie Q, this is where, lost
your video again.
Oh, what a drag.
What is going on there?
Well, we'll just
right in the middle of an Omnipressor tip.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying with the Omnipressor, the reason why it was so important because of the way you can, on a guitar like that, the kind of sustain you can get. It was the secret to James Burton's sound that he had learned, Jim Messina had learned from Burton, who also had imparted it to Keith Richards. Because Keith Richards basically ripped off Burton. They didn't talk to each other.
Right.
Because Burton got, basically that 5-string thing is actually a James Burton thing. And Keith stole it from him. They're arch enemies.
They were great borrowers.
So I think the way to look at it all is everyone learns something from someone. You think about it, it's like people can say, well, I know how to do this, yeah, but where'd you learn that from so-and-so? Where'd you learn that from so-and-so? And it just goes down the line. That's the beauty probably now of what we're doing today and where we are today in the world, where we're able to pass on things so they don't get lost from people before us. We just borrowed it. And we groomed it, we loved it, we took care of it. It drove us. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And I love just talking about it.
Well, let's talk a little more about the Jellyfish record, if that's all right. Because that record is, first of all, it's an amazing record. And I didn't realize quite how early in your career it was. I mean, you're saying like that was the first thing. That was kind of the impetus for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
But there's a great story about a certain Beach Boy coming to the studio that I'd love it if you told that, because I think it's got so many levels to it. It's amazing.
The real story?
Well, sure.
Can I do it, I wonder?
Why not? It's just the internet. You tell as much of it as you want to tell.
Well, I can only tell you the way I remember it. He came to the studio. Of course, the guys were excited. I was never a big Beach Boys fan or a big Queen fan. And of course, Jellyfish were both those things. So as I look back on it, it was probably a good thing because I didn't know, I wasn't trying to do any, as an engineer, I was trying to create those kinds of sounds because I didn't listen to those records. And I think that was a good thing because it probably would have been too retro had I done that. So we had the studio set up with, I don't know, every keyboard you could imagine. I mean, there had to be 50 keyboards in there. Everything you could imagine was in there. And they were so excited because their hero was coming to the studio. And he walked in and he just kind of walked around. He looked at everything and didn't say much. And I was like, wow, like, why is he not saying something. Like, why is he not blown away? I mean, there's 3 Wurzels over there, a tube one, a solid state one, a harpsichord, a piano, timpanis. I mean, on, marching drums. I mean, it's just like a store of stuff, right? And then he kind of walked away by himself, and he went into the control room. And I followed him in. And the door closed, and he looked at me, perfectly coherent, perfect English. And he said, I came here to learn something from these kids, and they're doing all the stuff I've already done. This is boring. And then when the door opened and they all came in, he totally changed. But I saw like 25 seconds of the real Brian.
Right.
Never forget it. I don't know if that's a story you're thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that then that sort of gave you an epiphany of, wow, yeah, these instruments have been done, so what are we going to do that's new? How are we going to push it? How are we going to come up with a different way to use these tools that anyone can use? And
the truth is, at the end of the day, it's, I miss you. My life is garbage. Please come back to me. Intro, drum fill, first verse. Turn around, crash, B section. Organ. Re-intro, second verse, harmony on the 3rd line and on the 5th line. Right? Breakdown, second chorus, organ, tambourine. It's all the same thing. When people go like, well, this is modern because it's got an 808. Really? Well, 808, 707, and 606 are really old.
Very old.
They're not new. So if you think that the Weeknd just discovered an 808, dude, like 808 is like years old, decades. It's not new. So it's not about any of that. It's really about the melody and the lyrics and because what we're doing is social commentary. We're just delivering emotional feelings. We're talking about social justice or whatever is happening at the time, whether it's Vietnam for Buffalo Springfield or if it's Black Lives Matter right now.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. And it's still basically the same configuration. It's really not any different. That's how I see it.
So there's one other thing about, yeah, that's perfect. There's one other thing about the Jellyfish record though, which I've got it, because I mean, I obsessed on that record when it came out, listened to it 5 million times. And I've said publicly a bunch of times that Revolver is my favorite Beatles album and Tomorrow Never Knows is my favorite Beatles song. And I didn't notice until today that The King is Half Undressed, the verse pattern is Tomorrow Never Knows.
Yep.
How did I not notice that? But it's like dead on, and it's so awesome to have it in this completely different context and then have it go somewhere completely different for the choruses. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Beck. Also, you can hear a lot of the same beat in some of Beck's stuff. God, he's really talented.
Yeah.
So I would say Jellyfish would be what you just said, and then probably I would say Weezer's Pinkerton is another big jump,
right?
Because it's like a Paul's Boutique. It's loved by the musicians. Just because you get lucky and you get to, you and I both know that when you work with real talented people, like what we're talking about with the Jellyfish guys or some of these other people, it's there. When some of these records come to you and you put those pages up, you're just like, gee, I hope I don't screw it up.
Yeah, there is that. But at the same time, you gave me your playlist of, 10 tracks you've worked on that you're proud of. And more than half of them, you go to that band's like Spotify, you search for the band, you go, and it's always got like their top tracks are on the top of the screen. The song you did is their number 1 track by a factor of 10 for more than half of that playlist. So there's a little something coming out of you too. I mean, you're managing to get what you're talking about expressing the story and the reaction to what's going on in the world. You manage to make that happen in a way that people get, that listeners get and connect to. And it's across your entire catalog, and you got a pretty diverse catalog. but it's never about the sounds, and
Well, we're
it's
chasing
always
a
about
feeling,
the story.
right? Well, we're chasing a feeling, right? If you think about what we do, it's kind of amazing. Like, there's two pieces of paper called speakers, and they move the air. And we're appealing to one sense out of the five senses. We're only appealing to this one. And how do we do that? Like, how do we make someone feel things, but we're only hitting one sense? They can't taste it, they can't smell it, they can't see it. Right? But we have to somehow make them feel something.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. We're just like chasing, because the tone is just a carrier for the feeling. It's the only reason why we're chasing the tone, because you just want a certain feeling, and that tone gives me that feeling. It's all really about the feeling.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're sort of touching on this a little bit. So there are two albums I wanted to ask you about that are not from the same time period necessarily, whatever, but they involve people as the artists who actually have had greater success doing other things. So one of them would be Semisonic, because Dan Wilson as a songwriter is a force. I mean, he's one of the best songwriters out there. And they had a good career as artists, but did you have any sense while you're working with him that somehow, like, the songs are better than the band in a way? Because there's stuff he writes about for other people that you sort of hear in the Semisonic, and it doesn't always work in that context, but universally it just works so well. Or did that not even occur to you while you're working on this stuff? I just make things up and then ask you to validate me, basically.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I want to be respectful.
No, don't bother.
I think he's one of the, I don't know if you know how much you know about him. He was a debate captain in college.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know him. I know him well, and I love his guitar playing and singing. And anyway, go on. Yeah.
I thought his approach to guitar was unique. The solo in Closing Time is amazing. One of the most magical moments. I remember when I heard that, I was just like, oh my God, it's so amazing. But I do think he's a songwriter first.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bad thing to say.
No, I don't think so at all.
I'm not saying I don't love his voice. I'm not saying he's not a great artist.
He is. I think it's more that kind of the range of his songwriting is just much wider than any one artist could do. And some artists will try to sort of shoehorn all their ideas through themselves as an artist. And some people, I think, like Dan, realize this one's not for me, this one's not for me, and it's a smart thing. All right, so before I dig a deeper hole on that one,
but let's add this. Would you not agree with me? Would you not agree with me that we've worked with really talented musicians, like people are just like crazy talented, but they're not great songwriters.
Yeah.
And you make the record and everything is right about it, but like, it's dead from the waist under. It has no public energy, and it doesn't go on to be successful. But they might be some of the best people you ever been in a room with. So at the end of the day, that relationship that he had to his unique guitar playing, his unusual voice, and his phenomenal songwriting, that's great artist.
Yeah. Let's leave that there, because I can't say anything else about that won't be. Anyway, moving on. we'll come back. I love Dan, and it wasn't. I think it all sort of came out sort of inside out in a way, but it's more like his scope as a songwriter is kind of breathtaking, and as an artist, you don't have to confine yourself. And so anyway, but I want to talk about The Grays, which is not a record that was that popular, but the band is insane. The four people in that band. So.
Yep.
I could catalog them, or you can catalog them, but I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of their roles in the record and how that worked out and things like that.
Well, John Bryan and Jason Faulkner, both of which were ex-Jellyfish, at the time wanted to kill each other. So that meant I had to come up with ways to do it, because I couldn't put them in the same room. So that meant I had to put one in an iso booth and one in another room so they could see each other, but still be separate. So it was all those kinds of things I had to do. I had to be very careful that one wouldn't get more love than the other one. But they were both incredibly talented. I think the friction is always good. I noticed that when I look at a lot of things, there's always a lot of friction on a lot of stuff that really, really works well. I can't tell you how many artists I work with to this day. They don't like each other.
Well, Black Crowes are kind of a poster child for that, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But so were the Who, so were the Beatles, so were the Stones. It's not new, right? I mean, that's what Glyn tells me when he was working with those people. He tells me stories that are amazing stories about all those people. I think the most amazing thing I solved that I really, for me, was a proud moment. This is what comes to mind. Was Jason Faulkner. This was one of the problems, is that Jason Faulkner made amazing demos. And he'd bring in these demos that were just like, okay, that demo is like beyond amazing. Dripping of emotion and feeling and uniqueness and character. And how I'm scared that we're going to be able to get that. Now, keep in mind that when you have those sort of homegrown demos, it's the same brain that's playing everything. It's the same brain that plays the drums, the bass, guitar, etc. So that means they feel everything the same way in the bar line. And so there's a connection to how all that goes together that you can't get with 4 or 5 separate brains. One plays a little late, one plays a little early. They just feel the bar differently. They feel eighth notes, quarter notes different, whatever it is, sixth. They feel it different. Where, you know, the one kitchen, let's just call it kitchen demo, is locked.
Right.
And so that happened. And it was a song that was going to be a single. And every time we tried cutting it with everybody together, it just didn't feel right. And what it was is when he would go to the chorus, the way he played the chorus, which was, he was writing on a cymbal, it just didn't feel the same way with the drummer in the band. And so I set up 2 drum kits looking at each other. And I was like, okay, you're going to play the verse and you're going to play the chorus. And you, Mr. Verse, you're going to play along. And when we get to the chorus, you're going to go da-da, boom, boom, stop. And Jason's going to hit the downbeat and he's going to take it. And that's how I got the track to work.
Wow.
And it was that kind of thinking constantly of how to be faithful and honest to what was great about the demos, but the band still had to be the band.
Right. I mean, and those 2 guys could easily have played every instrument on every song themselves. So
100 times.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then you've also...
And that was the other problem.
And also, so Mr. Verse, as you call him, is Dan McCarroll, who went on to be president of Warner Brothers,
Correct.
and now he's at Amazon. And I mean, but super nice guy and a great
and
drummer.
Capitol. Yes. President of Capitol too. But yes, he is a great drummer. He's just the way he felt the eighth notes wasn't the same way that Jason felt the eighth notes. It just had a different idea of where those fit in the bar line.
That's funny. And I was talking to Buddy the other day, the 4th member of the band. So Buddy Judge, who worked with Aimee Mann and a bunch of people. I mean, so you've got 4 artists in their own right, really, at that point.
Yes.
But just a little note about sort of Dan's idea of being a rock star, which was not at all what he was doing. His buddy said they were doing a show as the Buddy Project, and they wanted him to take a drum solo, and he just refused. So they all just went off stage, and he just sat there playing time for 10 minutes. No fills, no cymbals, nothing until they came back on stage. He wasn't going to stop. So to have that kind of personality in amongst the craziness, I can't even imagine. I mean, John and Jason in a room is one thing, but to have them in a room and hating each other at the time, that's a producer gig.
Buddy was my saving grace. He was like really helped me a lot because he had John's ear and I kind of had Jason's ear. Between the 2 of us, we were able to like manage it. The other story I think is funny about that record is that when we took it to the record company, the record president said, "This can't work." And everybody in the room looked at each other. huge typical, if you can imagine a big room with 30, 40 guys in a record company. And they go, well, why? And he goes, well, there's 3 singers. Jason has songs, John Bryan has songs, and Buddy has songs.
And that's never
so
happened
there's no
before.
way you can make that work.
No, you got to have 4.
And that's never happened.
You had to let Dan sing one song on every
and so
record.
There was one guy who's a brand new A&R guy, who's brand new. He'd only been in the job for a couple of weeks. And he kind of raised his hand up, The record president goes like, what? Like that to him. He goes, didn't the Beatles have 3 singers? He was fired.
Right, of course. Yeah.
True story.
That's hilarious. Wow. Well, and it's a really good record. Again, I listened to that for the first time in a while. I listened to that today and ended up listening to the whole record because it's just really good. And I love because there's some, the obvious sort of retro Beatlesy stuff and whatever, but there's also some amazing like XTC vocal melodies where the guitar is doubling the vocal and these ascending melodies and things like that. Some really, really clever stuff going on there. And it sounds amazing. It's
musicians.
It's a great sounding record too, though. Just like the Jellyfish record. Those are both, they're impeccable. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you can go back that far and okay, yeah, it's good of the time or whatever, but there's nothing that isn't musical about what it sounds like, and it sounds incredible. I would think. That's what I say. So there you go.
We had time. There was a lot of time to experiment, and really do it right. It wasn't a race.
Right.
It was like, is it right?
That's amazing. It's because it's easy to let money or time constraints give you an excuse. But when you don't have an excuse, you really either have to like, well, whatever, we'll just do this, or you've got to commit like that. And you always commit like that, which is pretty admirable. Because it ain't easy.
Yeah, my feeling's always been that if you can do it, get it. If you can do your own unique thing, right? Then if you win, you really win. And it's what propelled me to work on a Focusrite. Because I thought, okay, well, everyone else is on an SSL with a pair of NS10s and the usual suspect of outboard equipment. So if I have success on an entire different system, I blaze my own path. But I could fail because, as we know in commercial record making, it's not always about being unique. It's about being what is sort of expected.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I explain it is it's the wheel of blame. And if you do anything where you're responsible, but you're hiring other people to do it, if you go outside the box at all, then your name is on the wheel of blame. But it's like, well, hey, I hired the guy who, had the big hit. So, but you've got to go off piste, as they say, here and there. That's correct. So, and that room, I mean, you're talking about being on the Focusrite. You were in that room for 12 years?
13. 13 years.
13 years. Amazing. And anyone who's watching or listening to this who doesn't know, just search online for Jack's rooms. I mean, it's basically the room that's behind him right now, but with a 90 input. It was a weird number, right?
72. That was 72.
Oh, straight 72. Okay, so 72 input Focusrite, one of 3 Focusrite consoles of that size.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the higher number because the reverb returns, there were 12 channels, and that was part of
right.
That was considered inputs.
So yeah,
why you think of that.
An amazing setup. All right. Well, you mentioned the Black Crowes earlier.
Highly modified.
Yeah. And it's still there, still working, which is great. So let's talk about the Black Crowes, though.
Yeah, I think.
When you want, or go back to the Focusrite, either way.
No, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want. I'm here for you.
No, I cut you off, though. The delay's making it difficult, so.
Oh, I was just saying I'm here for you, so it's whatever you want to speak about.
Well, let's talk about the Black Crowes, because you worked with them on a bunch of records and a bunch of big records. So anything you want to talk. I also love, you've got a line in an interview you did a while ago where you worked with the Black Crowes, Sheryl Crow, all the Crows. But we can start with the Black Crowes.
I would say it's probably the most next to the Stones, the most rock and roll room I've ever been in. Like, I got in a fist fight with Chris, for instance. It was intense, very, very intense. We did have money to spend time to make it really great. If I'm not saying the albums are great, I'm just saying that we had time to make them as great, what we thought was great.
I'll say they're great.
That way, at the time. And that was like a lot of really hard work and a lot of time. Every amplifier was, look, the same thing I said earlier about when we made those Jellyfish records and all that kind of stuff. We sweated over everything. Is it a Everready battery or a such and such battery in the guitar pedal? Does this guitar chord sound better than that guitar chord? Oh, we'll turn the guitar chord around. Oh, it sounds better that way. Okay. Same thing in the patch bay, every patch bay chord. Running wires underneath the door is supposed to go through the patch bay. I mean, we just did everything we could do to make it the best we thought it could be. And, really great microphones, Telefunken 251s on the tom-toms. Which I look at it now, I'm like, what was I thinking? Putting that kind of microphone on the tom-toms. Like, are you on high? But, KM54s, KM56s, like the really great Neumann microphones that kind of just can put it almost anywhere and it works. They're so good. That Magic console, at Sound City was one of the Magic most. I would say the 3 or 4 Magic consoles I worked on in my life, it was one of them.
Yeah.
Where it just had it. But they were tough to work with, really, really tough. I think what sort of sums up how, when I say it was rock and roll, I remember one day I made a suggestion about an arrangement. And they tried it and they're like, nah, we don't like the idea. Like, okay, cool. So I walk off and I'm doing something else. I don't remember what it was. And the next thing you know, my assistant says, hey, there's a call from the Black Crowes manager. Okay, so I get on the phone. And as I pick up the phone, the way Sound City was set up, right next to the control room was like a little ISO booth. And I look over and they're in the ISO booth, the Black Crowes. And the manager's like, so I just heard that you made an arrangement thing and they're not happy about it. I said, yeah, but I told them that, it was just an idea. We don't have to do it. They go, just a minute. So guys, he says it was just an idea, but I can see them. They're on the call right next to on the other side of the class. I'm like, this can't be happening. And I'll never forget that.
Wow.
And that's how they were. But again, it's kind of what made them what they were.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you hear very similar stories about Oasis. Same, both
yes.
About the brothers, but also about the sort of like their band was an insular force, and it was weird for them that people would think they would know better sometimes.
Well, the Black Crowes opened for a show that I went to that Oasis did, and it was at an amphitheater. I'll never forget it. And after the show, we're all backstage. Everyone's hanging out, drinking, whatever, partying. And the security guard comes in. He goes, guys, we're just on the other side at midnight. We got to close this down. And he got up. Liam got up and he looked at the guard. He goes, let me explain something to you. You and your little bodyguards are going to go to the store and buy some sleeping bags because we'll tell you when the show's over. Okay? Get out. That's rock and roll.
Yeah. There's a documentary here about Rockfield, this studio that was on the BBC last week, and they're interviewing those guys. And one of the things that was really great was them saying that they were just as proud of how good they were at going to the pub as they were of being a good band. Because it was life. It was not a band. It was not a day job. It was 100% of who they were.
Well, I think if we're honest with each other, it's what I always say about what we do. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the other woman. If you're, from my standpoint as a guy, this is the other woman, and it's a lifestyle. And I think about it all the time.
Well,
and I can't wait to try things like, what about this? What about that?
So let's talk about that in the context of the Black Crowes, because I mean, you're working with them. you're having fistfights with them. They're calling their manager because you wanted to try an arrangement change. They're really difficult, but obviously you think you're making a really good record at the same time. But that doesn't sound like the sort of experience you'd want to repeat, but you made 3 records, 4 records. I mean, you kept coming back and they kept coming back to you. So what do you attribute to them coming back to you, and why did you continue to take the gigs?
So I remember on one of the records, they came with the songs, and I didn't think the songs were exactly right. And I remember calling Glyn Johns. And I said, Glyn, I explained the whole situation. He said, you think this is unique? I said, yeah, it's kind of, goes, no. When the Who had done Pinball Wizard, they were so big at the time. They were so on their game. And the guitar player of the Who walked into the control room where I was working on whatever record he was working on. He said, I got the demos. I want you to hear them. And we're going to do Pinball Wizard #2. And he popped the cassette in at the time. And Glyn said he listened to it. And it stopped, and the guitar player looked at him and said, what do you think? And he goes, rubbish. You think that those are songs for your next record? Get out. And this is like, what are you talking about? You're talking about like a rock star, beyond a rock star, at the top of his game.
Yeah.
Right?
And a feisty one at that, said, you know.
That's correct. And he came back 2 months later with what became Who's Next. That would have never happened had Glyn not threw him out of the control room. So the point of that is that there is that point where you have to take that chance and hope that you're right and stand up at all costs. No, that's not right. That's not how it goes. That's not how it should be. This is what I think, and I'm unmovable. And you go and do that a few times, but sometimes you have to do that.
So what was the outcome of that, though? So basically, they came to you and said, we're going to make another record, and here are the songs. And you said, well, these songs are not happening.
They come back with new songs.
Right.
One of two things happens. They either come back with new songs, or they go to someone that says yes.
Yeah, because they'll always find someone to say yes, especially a band that level at that time. But it really says something that they
want. I could tell that story, but I don't think I should.
But they wanted to work with you enough that they would actually say, okay, let's go. I mean, because that's pretty huge. Going from like, we don't want an arrangement change from this guy to, I guess our songs aren't up to snuff. I mean, that's huge. And was it that respect that made you think, like, even though this is going to be difficult, I want to do it again?
You know, I think that here's how I'm going to answer that. If I had any criticism of current status right now, of where we're at as a business, is I think sometimes people don't realize, don't appreciate chemistry. Okay, let me fix it.
Sorry, man.
No, it's no big deal. It's just push a button here. I think sometimes people don't realize, is it on?
Yep.
I think sometimes don't appreciate or realize how important and significant chemistry is. And if you look at some of the classic artists that have lasted the test of time, a lot of them work with the same person. Because they find that for whatever reason, love, hate, whatever it is, somehow when you put those things together, X comes out. And unfortunately now, I think a lot of artists, because again, when you're a great record producer, the downside of that is it's sort of a thankless job because no one really knows actually what you're doing. If you're really good, because you don't make it about yourself. You're just keeping the session on target. It's just going. Everyone's happy. You're making the changes. It's working. You're doing your thing, and it works. So then they think, oh, well, he didn't do anything.
Right.
Well, no, you just didn't realize what he was doing because he was good. He didn't make it about himself, right? We're not the artist. They're the artist. They're what is what's magic. We're just literally the vessel to get it through. And so I think with them, they understood that. And somehow, even though maybe we don't think he's cool, maybe we don't think he's this, maybe we don't think he's that, whatever the complaints were, it somehow was working. And they understood that.
Right.
And that's a little bit of a street thinking. It's a little bit of street thinking, and the extremely a certain kind of arrogance doesn't understand or appreciate that. That's been my experience.
And I suppose also it helped that they had made 2 records, I think, before you worked with them, right? So it's not like you did the first record, it was a success, and people were afraid to change. I mean, they had already changed it up a little bit, and they really made the decision that you were the guy to make the records with.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it's what I call platinum success, right? When artists have that kind of success, they then the label takes a back seat. So like with John Mayer, when we went to make the second album, Heavier Things, he was like, hey, we can do whatever we want. We just come out such a huge freshman success. Rick comes like, there's no budget. Do what you want to do. Whatever, let us know when it's done.
Right. Well, we could talk about John Mayer a little bit then, like how that first record came about and whatever, because that's again, another sort of astounding sounding record. And also, I think what was interesting to me going back and listening again, because again, it had been a while since I'd heard it, is it's an incredible mix of the sort of melancholy singer-songwriter thing that could really attract a lot of people with these incredibly poppy hooks sort of thrown into the middle of it, but it works every single time, and you like both. You wouldn't say, well, I'm a fan of the darker bits, but I don't like the rest of this song. Everything about it really, really works, and that's difficult. And obviously, it's songwriting, but it is also production to make that stuff work, to have those gear shifts like that.
He's a very naturally, insanely talented person, like crazy good at what he does. Obviously, the first record was different than records as he went along, because the first one had more of the Berkeley pseudo jazz smart stuff, and he's always wanted to be Stevie Ray Vaughan or Hendrix.
Right.
That's what he really wants to be. And that's not the same thing as sort of the pseudo-y, smarter, I call it jazz, but I'm saying it very loosely, element. Because I can remember all the guys like Q-Tip, all those guys were just like, every time we'd see him in a restaurant, it was like, had to beat him off with a stick. They really could see his talent. He was a lot of fun to work with.
And how did it come about working with him?
Phenomenal. I've had a career. It's not as much this way now as it has been in the past. Now it's different, but in the past, let me explain it this way. The way I look at it is the record company is the parents. They're the ones that call you up and say, please come to the show. You got to see this band. You're like, okay. So you go to the show. They're like, okay, so tell me about the band. Like, oh, well, there's 3 brothers. Oh, that's cool. So what kind of music do they play? And, they're 17, 18, and 19, and really young. Oh, wow, that's awesome. So tell me about the music. And, one has blonde hair, I can't get them to talk about the music. But when I go to the gig, the grandparents are there, the publishing, people who care about the songs. And that's the ones I hang with. I hang with the grandparents. And why I call them the grandparents is they're the ones that the bands or the artists go to and say, I want a bus, I need this, I need that. And they go, okay, here's $50,000. You don't tell the parents I gave you this money, okay? Just take it, advance against your publishing, but don't you dare tell them I gave you this money. So how that relates to this question is they're also the same ones that many times have come to me and said, we think this song is like an amazing song. We don't think it's right. And that began what we started calling fix and mix. Like, okay, here's the record. Can you fix it? Can you edit it? Can you add parts? Can you change things? Like, what do we need to do to make the song come alive? Because we know it's there, but it's not firing 8 cylinders. And that's how I first got on John's career.
Right. So he'd already made the record, but it was not done. It wasn't right.
Some of it, not all of it.
Some of it.
Some of it. So Your Body Was a Wonderland is one that they thought could be a big hit, but they didn't think it was working. Same thing with a band called the Verpipe.
Right.
That record was finished and done, produced, mixed by one of the Algaes, actually. Done, finished. They're like, that song's not right. That one I recut totally from scratch. And that went on to be their biggest hit. But I had a reputation to this day for doing that. So this day, still I'm working with an artist from Australia that's happened with. Like, we know these songs are great. They're not firing on 8 cylinders. Can you adopt the child and raise it? We don't think the parents are raising it right.
Right.
But we think the kids are smart. That's basically kind of what it is.
Right. Well, so this,
and that's it's a different kind of way. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say just a different kind of record making. It's I mean, you and I both know that that's the hardest kind of record making to do, because it takes a certain amount of know-how of a lot of different things, and how to be smart about how to give it a chiropractic crack. That's not the same thing as just recording something. And it's why pop records are actually, as you know, the smartest making records, because it's intentional. What you're doing is intentional. You know how to manipulate what you're doing for an outcome.
So
and that's not the same thing as capturing the butterfly.
So let's talk, just because I'm really curious about this, with Your Body is a Wonderland. So he's cut a version of this song. The publishers feel like this is not right yet and come to you. So do you work on it with John right away, or do you do some stuff and then it's presented back to John? And what did he think about? Like, did he think the version he had was right, or did he realize that it needed a little something?
He thought the version was right. He didn't hear it to, he heard the mix. I was working also with Robbie Williams on Millennium at the time.
Another amazing sounding track.
Robbie Millennium, that song there are literally stuff that's on that record that are in John's record. And I probably should have said that now, because that's not legal. It's, old history.
Yeah, you just meant figuratively.
But there were some things that were, no, I actually took a few things that were on the tape. I should have done it. But no, he heard it when it was finished. I'm not sure what he thought. I can't tell you that he was blown away, and I can't tell you he hated it.
Right.
But I think John was in a position at that point where he didn't have any power.
Right.
He was a guy that graduated from Berkeley. He was on a small label called Aware that was going through Columbia. He had no power. He had no say.
It's a really interesting situation, though, because the sort of mantra of most producers is you're making the artist's record. That you're not there to make your record, you're making the artist's record. But that really is a situation where you're not making your record, but you are kind of telling the artist what their record actually is, even though they think they've already made the record. And that's a tricky one to sort of be true to yourself, but get the point across.
I agree with that. Look, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you say what you want to say and they don't agree and they fight you. And then you see them. I saw an artist at a bar a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget. He said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I said, Yeah. I haven't seen you for a long time. He was on Warner Brothers. He said, "I want you to know that everything you told me was right, and I failed, and I regretted not listening to you." And it depressed me beyond, because that was basically what he said is, I failed, and I failed him, because I wasn't smart enough or skilled enough to get him to see it the other way. Right. I failed him, even though he didn't say that, but as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't a proud moment for me. So sometimes it's like, well, maybe I'm not conveying this right. It's how it is when an artist comes in the control room and maybe it's not exactly right. And you say, I gotta tell you, I don't know how you came up with that second verse. I just think that I never thought of doing X, Y, Z, whatever it is. You're like, wow, cool. You think that? I go, I just, can we play it again? Because it's just, hey, play the second verse. Just hear it one more time. Turn it up. It's amazing. And then it stops and you say, now the chorus, now they're going to listen.
Yeah.
You always wanted to talk about the chorus, but you went to the verse first and talked about that particular thing or whatever it might be. I just picked that as an example.
Yeah. But I mean,
There's
that's
so much psychology.
That's the genius of the great producer. Tons of good producers have great ideas, but it's knowing how to present the idea in a way that you're actually going to get to try it and get to where you feel it's got to go. And also be open to your ideas not being great once you hear them, you know?
Well, I mean, I think you would agree with me. I'm sure you would agree with me in your career that there's even producers that have famous names that you meet and you're like, wait, it's not what I thought. But yet, he does have his name to these 10 amazing records. How? And that's because it's done so many different ways, right? I mean, in other words, some of the greatest musicians that are producers actually end up not being great producers because there's too much of them in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do that. I'm not a musician on a level of, I don't know who you want to pick. You know, I can't do it because I'm not a great enough musician to do that. I think that's a good thing. Now,
have you ever played bass on somebody's record?
No, almost. I'm not good enough.
That's so fun. See, Pro Tools and I have played bass on a few records, actually.
Good for you.
I'm not even proud of it. I was mixing a song for somebody and the verse just would not work and there was no bass. And this can't be like this. So I put bass on. I then sent the mix with the note like, hey, look, I know I'm overstepping, but blah, 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 blah. I got fired off the mix, but they asked me to send the bass part. Like, you've got to be kidding me.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. But I mean, as a producer where it's like, I know exactly why this isn't working. I know exactly what will make it work. And if you're kind of on your own in the room, I don't know. I guess you try and make it happen. But it's a really weird position to be in.
And it's interesting you say that because we've all been fired and it's not fun.
No.
It's never fun.
No.
And I think some of the ones I've been fired on, I don't even remember because it's like childbirth. Just forget it. I don't try to. It just wasn't a good memory.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, you've got enough you weren't fired off of. We should talk about a few other records. I mean, let's talk about Pinkerton for a second because Pinkerton...
Yeah, that guy's so talented.
Yeah.
What a freak.
Anything in particular? I mean, because, my experience with Rivers is that he's an absolute... So this is, again, going back to the songwriter thing, where he loves pop songs, super, super pop songs, but he happens to have one of the loudest bands around. And it's a brilliant marriage of these melodies that you cannot get out of your head and chord progressions and clever everything, but just done brutally in the choruses and things like that.
Two things I remember about him that I'll say, really talking out of school. But
you don't have to if you don't want to. You can always backtrack.
I think people know that. No, I think they know that I respect him so much that I don't mean it in a bad way. But he had come off of that first album, which was very, very successful, right? It goes back to what I said earlier about John Mayer freshman. When you have that kind of freshman success, well, let me say this. The hardest record to make is a sophomore, right? You have the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. Each one have their own issues. And it's hard because, when you make that sophomore record, you can't go make Abbey Road. You're still at Meet the Beatles. You have to be true and honest to the artist. As much as I would like to take it all the way there. It's like, no, but that's not right for the artist. You got to keep the audience with you. You have to do what's best for them. It's not about you. So when we got to that second album, he'd come off again a very successful freshman record. Now it's a sophomore record. Again, the hardest one to make. If you have success on the freshman.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go all the way the other way. He wanted to be as grungy, as cool. The amount of time we spent on EQing and fucking with and messing around with.
No, you can say fucking. Don't worry about it.
If I offended anybody, I apologize. I didn't mean to.
I fucking say fucking all the time. Don't worry about it.
Okay. The amount of time we spent on the room mics, EQing them, and just trying to make it sound as a little unpolished and cool sounding as possible. That's all we spent all our time on. Because he'd come off of that sort of slicker, what you described is if you described the record very well, that first record. And so he wanted to go the other way. But what I discovered with him is he's a shredder.
Oh, God, yeah.
I remember getting a guitar sound. I didn't know that. I didn't hear that on the record. So I remember I was working on the guitar amp, setting up the amp, the mics and stuff, and he was just screwing around. And I was like, man, can you shred? Like ridiculous. Like Mr. Metal.
Yeah. And
then when we went to do the solo, he goes, oh, yeah, I can do that, but I don't want him to know I do that. I play it down. But he can play. He can really play.
Yeah.
And he's smart as hell. And I think he's a genius, actually. I really do.
Yep.
Plagued with all the things that geniuses have.
Yep. Enough said.
Really talented.
Yeah, very, very talented. So staying in the rock vein, I'd love to hear a little bit about L7, because The Beauty Process was kind of a big record for them. They'd been big and then not so big, and no one quite knew if they were supposed to have been big before, and it was a big, big deal. At least that's the way I saw it from the outside.
Yeah. What would I say about it? I mean, it was so much fun. I have a great memory of it, as I do of Susanna Hoff's record, because it was the Bangles and Susanna Hoff's band were, what am I thinking? Bangles and anyway, the two bands. It was fun working with the girls. It was different than working with the guys. It's just a different thing. And I know that's dangerous to say in the Me Too.
No, but
I don't mean any kind of weird way. It's just, they were just different. And it was fun.
You didn't get into a fist fight with anyone?
Oh, no. But they were all tough. They were tough. Really, really tough. But it's fun. Like Courtney Love was fun. The whole record was fun. She was not like anything else I ever worked with. And she was everything that you think of, smoking a pack of cigarettes. She showed up one night in negligee. It was everything you thought about her. That's who she was. Or is, I should say.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. I really enjoyed L7. I'm not sure. I don't really know if I have a really cool, funny story to tell.
No, it doesn't. Not even cool, funny. Just it was a big record in a lot of ways, I think, and you were a huge part of it. So I wanted to bring it up, and if there was anything in particular, great. But well, let me ask you about a different artist, and if anything occurs to you ever. So I would love to hear a little bit about Sparkle Horse. Because Mark, so talented and obviously incredibly troubled in lots and lots of ways. And I'd love to hear, because he made a lot of his music just like, I'm doing this on my own, but to sort of venture out into the normal record making world, I'd love to hear a little bit about what that was like.
Well, I think, thank God to Black Rose and a few other things I had worked on at the time, that particular time you're talking about, in this journey. Somehow I was seen, because I was told this by multiple people, as the commercial record maker that if you were going to slut out, for lack of a better description, he was the guy, if you're gonna give it up, do it with him. As opposed to some of the other people that at the same time I was competing with, because somehow they felt like I was still credible, even though I was a bad guy because I made successful radio records. But if you're going to do it, that's the devil to dance with.
Right.
You still keep somehow some of your credibility as an artist. And I think it's just because I was lucky to work with a few things that people still thought that about me at the time. He was very quiet, but very intentful. Kind of in some ways like you said about Loggins. He knew what he was doing. He understood every bar, every beat, and was very, very, this is how I want to do it. And I think that that's a kind of artist that you really pretty much follow their clue. You really try to take whatever you know and whatever ability you have that's God-given, right? Because as you know, we can't take credit for any of this. We get it at birth. We just honed it in, but we didn't invent it. We were given it at birth, our ability. So you can't even take credit for it. So with him, it was more like how much of my ability and know-how and talent that I have can help him get to his goal. And that's a lot of talking and listening and trying things and experimenting and being patient until you find that thing, for lack of a better description.
Right. Did you involve any other musicians on it? Did you bring people in to play with him, or was it just him?
And with an artist like that, it was just him. The only time, I can't think of an example right now, but a few times where I have brought someone in, it would be someone that they thought was great that I knew would inspire them.
Right.
So it wasn't even necessarily whether I may not even get anything out of that musician that day and be fine with it. If it turned on the artist and got him excited, and then he wanted to redo it or make him think of something, I succeeded.
Right.
As ugly as that might sound. I mean, it's kind of manipulative, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one other sort of in this stretch, because there's kind of this lineage from Jellyfish on of great LA bands, where LA is a weird city because some people don't really feel it has a music scene in a way because the record business is such a big deal. But obviously you had the 90s hair metal scene, you had the whole Chili Pepper scene, like there are tons of LA bands. But you were kind of the man for all of the super cool LA indie bands. And another one is Remy Zero, The Golden Hum, which is another fantastic record.
Yeah.
So anything you want to
say? Oh God, where do I start and stop at that one? I have so many like fond memories. I think that was the band that probably allowed me the freedom to do the most experimental stuff, period. Because that's how they thought. So their God was Radiohead.
Right.
Right. If they could push a button anything, they would be Radiohead. So Radiohead, who's made a lot of records, right, in the V Room of Ocean Way.
Yeah.
All about experimenting. I mean, there's no rules. And so with Remy Zero, it was whatever I wanted to do. And we had a big budget, by the way. That was definitely my time of not being a good boy in terms of doing some drugs. But we were in that sort of experimental phase, if you know what I mean. So, I don't know what to pick, whether it was, I remember recording the drums. I had an experience with working in a studio in France just prior to making this record. And this studio in France had 3 unique things I had never experienced before, to this day, actually. But one of the things that was interesting was in this area where we were recording in the basement, it had, the way the house was built, the back wall curved around. So it kind of did this. Like, so what you hear happens with my voice as opposed to this, because it was focused like this. And all of a sudden you had a clarity to the mid-range and the clarity to the kind of top end that you don't have when it's diffused. And it was just because of the way the wall went around this one spot where I had put the drums. And that was the first time I was like, why did I never think of doing that before? Which brought me to recording John's acoustic guitars with plywood behind them in a V shape so that I would get the 1K, 2K of the plywood, but also, again, this kind of real tight focus, right? So I went and got huge discs. You know, you think about those micro discs that you see on top of mountains, big, huge micro discs. I got 2 of those and put those behind the drums, thinking, okay, this is going to focus these drums. And if I put piezos on and tape them on those discs, God knows what sound will get off those discs, right? And the reflection it's going to do to the microphones, and it was incredible. I left them up for quite a while. And it was that kind of experimentation, you know, like, well, why? I don't have to put the amp in front of the mic in front of the guitar amp. What about if I put the cymbal in front and then the microphone on the other side of the cymbal? It was whatever I wanted to do.
Right.
And so there's a lot of experimenting like that. It was really so much fun. It was so much fun.
Well, and for the people listening, if you don't know that record, go find it. Remy Zero, The Golden Hum from 2001. It's a fantastic record.
Really hard in that record. Hours and hours. I have some beautiful photos in the studio of all the guitar amps we had, just everything we had. We were really, really, really spent time on it and experimenting. It was so much fun.
Do you ever think about putting a book out of the pic? Because I mean, you got to have pictures from lots of these sessions, right? Just and not of the people necessarily, because that gets into a whole different thing. But
yeah, you know, I think about, you know, one thing that's interesting is I found the other day 12 journals that one of my main assistants had kept of every session. I didn't know he did it.
Wow.
He actually had done it. And they're fun to look through. Because there's so many things I don't even remember. Like when you asked me about L7, I'm like, I had to think for a second, you know? Or I'll be talking to somebody and they go, yeah, I really like that song you did with El DeBarge. I'm like, El DeBarge? Like, I barely remember what that is. Yeah, you worked on that. Yeah, I did. You know? Because when you're so obsessed and it's 7 days a week, not 5 days a week, it's 7 days a week. You never stop, right? That it's just one thing after another. You can't remember it all. You know, I know that some sessions were more fun. Semi-Precious Weapons was so much fun because the singer, you know, was gay. And so that meant we had all kinds of people coming to the sessions, you know, trans this, trans that, this, that, tall, black, skinny, black, purple, and champagne every night. That, it was like being in the club, but in the studio. So much fun.
And your studio was set up for that too. I love, for a long time you had the big dining room table out there and the bar, the tiki bar, and yeah, very much.
Goo Goo
like
Dolls
that.
are the ones that the Goo Goo Dolls put the tiki bar in. That was their thing they put in. You know, what was it? The most remarkable thing I'll say about that you just mentioned was I probably had, I don't know, 65 guitar pedals that were out, laid out. And then microphones just always lived where the drums were. So U47s, 251s, you know, very expensive microphones. Do you know, of all the parties I had in there, no one took a thing. And there could be as many as 50 and 60 people. I don't even know who they are. No one ever lifted a thing.
Wow.
There was a reverence for it, I guess. You know, people, it's interesting about psychology of people that you just kind of looked around and they're like, you know, you don't fuck with this.
Yeah, it was, cool. I mean, I think it would be great if you just published a few pictures of the room for people who haven't seen it, because it was absolutely amazing. It did look like something you couldn't mess with, and not in a museum way at all. It was just, the room itself was a work of art. The control room was a work of art. That the aesthetic of all of it was incredibly well thought out and beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful in that room and conducive to being creative. I mean, it had to be.
Well, there were two. First of all, I had a runner that was dedicated to the room. And all he did every day was work on the room, whatever I told him to do. So every light bulb is now, it's the same brain that's the patch cords earlier that we talked about, or the cannon connectors. That same brain was like, okay, well, that Sylvania red 25-watt bulb is exactly right in that lamp. It puts out exactly the right one. So go and buy 15 of those and stock it, because that fixture only gets that bulb, right? And then I discovered, oh, well, if I mix black light with incandescent and LED light, I get this sort of look that's kind of acidy in a sense. Like the incandescent does the smearing of what you would do with Vaseline on a camera, but the black lights make things that are black really black and things that are really white really white. Like they're the contrast element. And the LED is the color that I can spot and control. And it's just like mixing. It's the same thing. Or cooking. It's all the same thing. Fashion. It's all the same thing. And I love the way you just described it. It's quite a compliment, because that was exactly my goal.
Well,
And
you
I'm
definitely
so
achieved it.
Actually
Absolutely. Well, and we talked years ago about this. I think it was for that show we did for Waves, and someone said, like, well, what would you do if you didn't do this? And you, with no hesitation whatsoever, said fashion, because of the visual of it, and obviously, I mean, you've always been an impeccable dresser and have lots of different sort of eras of dressing. It's really incredible. But I love that you've got that, like, with just like that. Yep, fashion. That's exactly what I would do. That you have these other things that you think about in that way. And the same visual sense for fashion is obviously what went into your sense of interior design. It's kind of the same thing in a way.
The dressing is important, maybe another thing we have to be careful about is we all work out of our homes a lot more. The entire business is just my personal opinion, is not working in your pajamas, but actually going in dressed to do the job. And I think maybe what also put this in my head is Rob Cavallo, who you know, was mixing Slide by the Goo Goo Dolls. And I came to studio that day, I was all in black. And he walked into control room and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing?" So, "What do you mean?" "You can't mix that song dressed like that. This song is Slide over here, like, Will You Marry Me? This is white. This is like beautiful white, like a white wedding or something. You can't. You got to go home and change." And I looked at him like, are you high? And my mind was thinking. But I went home and changed all into white clothes. And then he said to me, when we did Uninvited Alanis Morissette, on my way to the studio, I knew I didn't have the right clothes on. And he said, "You didn't know this, but I stopped and I bought a new pair of pants, new underwear, new socks, a different watch, even my watch I bought, and everything I bought all new stuff because I knew I wasn't wearing the right clothes to make that song a hit."
I love that it came down to the underwear too. Was it like Superman underwear, or was it
down to the underwear? But that goes back again to the patch cords and the microphone. It's the light that we're talking about. It's all like detail. And a large part of the reason why I did that lighting detail was for my assistants, because I wanted them to learn detail. I want you to be able to sit it in, and the musician says something and you're like, you already knows that there was a flam at bar 26, but you didn't say anything. They go like, "There's something not right around that second verse." And you just, boom, star 24, enter. Pro Tools goes right there, plays, goes, "Yeah, that's it." You're like, "Yep, I knew." And I knew exactly where it was. We didn't have to hunt for it. That's paying attention and detail and being pride and creating like excitement in the session. And, it's all part of what we do. Inspiration.
Yeah.
It's
well,
fun.
I think you
the session
can...
I did Friday.
Hmm?
The session I did Friday, they wrote me back the next day. They said, "That was so much fun." I was like, "I did it." To them, if they left and they thought that was fun, I succeeded.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also like, it's easy to sort of make light of it, like, "Oh, you're not wearing the right clothes," whatever. But the scene you set, as you've said many times, you're going after the emotion, you're going after the story. But if you have the environment that emotion would naturally live in, it comes easier than turn on all the lights and now let's get something sad going. Like, you build the world that would naturally live in, and it's easier to make it happen. Definitely.
I think artists, when they're growing up, they imagine what it's going to be like someday when they get into like the real thing, whatever that is in their mind. And so you want them to be able to walk in and look at the room that they're in, like this room. When people walk in this room, they're like, whoa, and you're like, yeah. Now they feel like, okay, this is the real thing. I need to be on my game. I need to deliver. I want to be like really great. Look at the records on that wall. Like, oh God, I love that record. I love that record. I love that artist. I love that artist. It's so important. It's not bragging rights. It's to get the best out of them.
Well, and it's also
because you and I both know, you and I both know all artistic people. And I'm going to say this about you, and I'm going to say this about me, and everyone that's on this line watching us right now. If you're a true artist, you are insecure. Anyone who tells you they're not insecure, they're
absolutely
lying. At birth, you get the insecure gene and the artistic gene, both are present. That's just how it is. So how do I create them feeling like they're in the womb? They can do it.
Well, and I think it also, though, it goes to a lot of your sort of philosophy of things. Is because there's some producers who set this up and it is more about them. It's like, check me out, now you're in my room and let's go. Whereas you do it, as far as I know, for the artist. Like, you're giving the artist the gift of, this is the dream realized, now come on, let's go, and all of this is for you. And that's huge.
Correct. Yes, we're going to hunt the tone and the attitude, the thing, to get what you're wanting to talk about to come out those speakers. We're going to chase it, everything we got in here. And we actually have machine guns, shotguns. We got everything here. We can do it. We can take the army down. They need to feel that.
Yeah.
Get the best out of it.
And to feel safe.
And by the way, actually, this one last thing I'll say is, like, even with, the gear, it's a funny thing, right? I think you've heard me say this, that you see all these people come on these different shows, which really nameless out of respect, and they go like, oh no, it's not about the equipment. It's all about the feel and how you get this and how you get that. And, people put too much importance in the gear. But meanwhile, behind them is $1 million worth of gear. Like, literally, they're in the picture, racks of shit. So I think that's retarded when they say that. I actually disrespect it. But the point I want to make is, if that makes them feel like they can do it, then it's valid. If you plug none of that stuff in, but the fact that you feel like you have it all behind you and you feel more secure, then it's valid. Even if it's not plugged in, it's valid.
Yeah. In
the same way, what we're talking about is valid for the artist. You're an artist too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, look, there are like 9 million records we haven't talked about, but I want to talk about something else for a second, if that's cool.
Sure.
So, going back to your idea of the parents and the grandparents, at some point, you decide, I think 2006, that you're going to go be a parent. So, what made you... Well, first of all, how did it come about that you started working at Interscope? Was that the first label you were working A&R at?
So because Ocean Way is so close to Capitol was holding their Tuesday morning A&R meetings out in the studio. I'd be in the control room working, and they'd be out in the studio part.
With the tiki bar.
I let them do that. One, because they wanted to do it. It was like so cool to be there as opposed to, sterile room somewhere in Capitol. And two, I said, okay, well, if I can come in and out and watch. And when I first started off, I thought my template should be Kissinger. Because Kissinger knows a little bit about everything. And he's an expert on a couple things, because you can't be an expert in everything. That's bullshit. But it's kind of good to know how the entire landscape works. So you understand what's going on. And whatever few things that you're actually good at will be even that much better, because you have an understanding of the whole picture. So Kissinger's the one, right, that tells the president on Air Force One, so when you talk to the French president, you don't talk about this, you don't do this, he likes red wine, he loves poodles, blah, blah, blah. And then the president goes in with that confidence. And I need to be that to the artist. So, but part of that is knowing how to talk to the A&R person who controls the checkbook for the artist. So, when Ron Fair was given Geffen Records as chairman, he said to Jimmy Iovine and all the people at the company at the time, I want to bring, they said, we got to have someone that take care of like the A&R and, you know, rock and knows a little bit about pop and a bunch. I want Jack.
Oh, just lost your video. Oh, I think we lost your audio as well. Come back, Jack. No one wants to look at me. I have a "we'll be right back" screen, but I didn't load it up. So you're just going to have to look at me. I'm the "we'll be right back" screen.
Do you want to do a question?
Yeah, we'll do a question. Hey, Mark.
Hey.
Let's do a question while we get Jack back on here.
Cool. Okay, so this is the most upvoted question, but I think that you could tackle this solo style.
Well, I'll do. We'll give it to Jack later, but
okay, all right. So this is from Lex Good, and he asks, "How do you cope with natural hearing loss when you get older?"
Well, there are a million things to say to that, but the one thing I would say to it is, unless it happens because of a specific event, it creeps. And so you actually are getting used to it and adjusting the entire time. As long as you're smart and you realize that's what's happening, you listen right through it. And I think also the more experienced you are, the less you're worried about certain frequencies. And it is all about that balance and the feel and all of that. So that stuff is less critical to have, flat hearing response. But yeah, you adjust to anything. So your brain will help you to adjust around it. And then if there's something specific where it's like, okay, people say there's this problem when I work on stuff, but I just don't hear it, then get it where you like it, but everybody says there's way too much 3.5K, fine, notch out a little 3.5 on your mix bus. Like you can do specific things, but usually it doesn't actually affect things as much as you think it might.
Right. Yeah, that question's actually come up several times. It's always like somewhere lurking in the question.
Yeah, I think one thing is that people tend to panic about it. Like every engineer is supposed to have golden ears. And that is not the case. Just humans in general don't have golden ears. Just from being out in the world, everybody over the age of something is losing high end just because your body's getting older. And then if you've been to concerts or you played in a band or whatever, you've got hearing issues, but you hear the world that way. So like I say, unless they're like really persistent problems that you absolutely like, really? What's wrong with that? Then I wouldn't worry about it, to be honest. You take care of your hearing as much as you possibly can because there's very little that can be done about it, but I wouldn't worry about it. And don't think that everybody else has better ears than you, because it's not. It sounds dumb, but it's very true. It's learning how to listen. It's not the physical part of your actual hearing.
Yeah. I have a kind of a funny story about that. I met Jonathan Little, who he has a headphone amp. I can't remember the name of it, but he has a Little Ebbs headphone amp, and it's amazing. And you can do source selection. You can flip left and right on it, which is really, really cool. But I remember I tried it out for the first time, and I flipped the left and the right. And he looked at me. He's like, "What do you think, man?" And I was like, "I hate it."
My hearing is fucked.
I was like, I just realized that I have a dip in my right ear or whatever.
Yeah. Are we getting Jack back?
Actually, yeah. So I see him.
I think so. I'm attempting to get us back.
Fantastic.
I'm not sure what happened there.
I don't know. It
just literally just dropped.
It's really weird how I'm in kind of the middle of nowhere in England, and my internet is so rock solid. It's insane. So you're sideways, but you're here.
I'm coming. I'm trying to come.
Excellent.
What are you seeing now? You seeing what you need to see, or?
Well, you're sideways.
Looks similar to what it was when we were
There we
connected.
go.
How about now?
Yeah.
There you are. You're not in the frame, but you're almost
What are you
there.
seeing?
I'm seeing the couch to your right.
Are you seeing the studio?
No, we
Couch to my
see-
right. Okay, so
We might have the other camera. There we
Okay,
go.
there you go. There's the studio. All right.
and now you see everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
Nice.
Sorry, everybody. I'll just set it down like this. Does that angle work?
Yep.
Perfect.
That'll be
I'm just-
great.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. All right, I'll let you guys.
I'm so
right.
sorry. I don't know
No
what
worries.
happened there.
No worries. I was saying that I've got they give me a little graphics package each week, and one of them is a "We'll be right back," and I never load it because I think it's like inviting something like that to happen. But then, of course, I got to talk through it when people disappear. But hey, it's the internet. So we were just talking about you felt like it was important to understand the entire ecosystem as a producer. So carrying on from there.
I think one of the things that frustrated me, always frustrated me, is like you work with an artist, you make a record, and then the A&R person gets fired. And that is the end for that band, because it's like, well, that's not my kid. I don't want to adopt him.
Yeah.
And I've gone to A&R people and begged them, please adopt a child. It's not their fault. Please adopt them. They worked so hard to get here. So I thought, I want to go inside the label and see how that works. And I saw some pretty ugly things. I saw some things that were just shocking. Really, really shocking. I also saw things where the label, they would play things and be like, that's not a hit. And I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. It's going to be massive. And through people fighting, they'd finally come out and it'd be massive. And then I'd be at the club and they'd be like, yeah, I knew when I signed it. I was like, you didn't know anything. So it was really interesting to see that some of the things that we think are actually true. They're just people. But I will say that when the A&R person is great, it completes the team.
Right.
There's nothing like great A&R. Great A&R is like priceless. But there's not a lot of it.
And did you enjoy doing it?
Yeah, I did really enjoy doing it because it was my way of helping block. Because my whole life, what I do is I block for artists. I just block for them. And I could block on a different level. So now I had the ability to affect change even greater, not only in the record making process, be able to stick up for them or suggest when they would say in a meeting, what about this soundtrack? And go, I got the artist. I got the song for the movie. And being able to really help them was great.
Right.
But it's not my first love. It's not like being inside the studio with the artist at all.
Right.
It's a different thing.
And did you work with most of the artists you were A&Ring on a production level as well, or not all? Because I mean, you were A&R, obviously the Klaxons you did, but you were also A&R Shirley Manson, right?
Oh my God, what story that is. Yes, I was A&R in Shirley Manson, and I was A&R different people I wasn't working with, and I intentionally knew ahead of time that I should hire certain people to work with artists to learn from them. So, what was it like to work with that producer as a record company person?
Right.
It was part, again, of the education of the entire process. Hearing them talk about, like the Klaxons you talked about. Okay, so there actually was another band. They're going to play David Letterman. Okay, what can I do for the David Letterman show that would really make it special? Fly to New York, be there, be at the rehearsal, see what that experience was like. Talking to managers, talking to the people that are cataloging the product, or radio, on PR, promotion, etc. Marketing, communication, just seeing how it all works so that I can be better at my job, my real job, which is helping artists realize their dream.
Right.
That's my real job.
And how long did you do it for? It was for a while, right?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. And
I really loved it. I would do it again. No problem. I mean, what I mean by do it again is I don't regret that time at all.
Right.
At all. Not even.
Lost your video again.
Amazing time.
And did you feel as though, did producers that you had already known, did they treat you differently than, like, did it change the relationship?
Yes. Everyone treats you differently because you have the checkbook.
Yeah.
You're in a total different position. Totally different position. Even with artists, with managers, everyone totally changed. People that were snooty, all of a sudden were your best friend.
Right.
Without a doubt.
And did you try to...
such a learning...
So you said that there was quite a bit that you saw that was a bit shocking things. Did you really make any attempt to change that, or this was just you were going to have your spot? You're not there to change the world at the label.
The way I would change it is once I saw some of the things that I thought were very shocking. You know, I won't say the artist's name, but having a meeting with all the top brass of Interscope, with an artist and that artist manager, and watching them tell the artist and the artist manager how amazing the artist is for 2 hours. And then that artist and manager walking out of the room and the higher brass looking at me and saying, okay, you know, that's your A&R responsibility. Yeah, I know. Drop it. What do you mean? We just spent 2 hours telling them that they're great. Yeah, I know. That was just a loop job. We now want you to just drop the artist. We want the blood on your hand. Once you experience that a couple times, you're like, okay, how do I get in front of this for the next one? So that would be what I would do. So when I knew artists were going to do certain things or have certain meetings, I'd say, okay, this is what you want to do. This is what you want to say. You got to make sure you walk in, you talk about your Twitter members, you talk about what's going on with Instagram, you talk about the shoes that you know, wear the cool shoes, do this, do that. You know, don't be too nice. You know, I just told them all the things to do that would impress the label, because so much of it is just how they're impressed with people,
right?
Not even actually what they have, because again, they're just people. They don't call it every time. No one does.
Yeah. Did you ever feel, or do you ever feel as though, especially with a lot of the stuff that used to be really behind the gates of record companies, you know, the ability to get distribution, things like that, even promotion at this point is very democratized. Do you ever feel like you would like to start a label that's run the way you would like to start a label, or it's just not what you want to do? Because you must have an idea of exactly how you think a label should run.
I do. I very much do. And I have to say that a large part of what I learned from Jimmy in particular, I think he was really good at running a label. Jeff Sasnow, who's at Warner Brothers now, he was at Interscope when I was at Interscope. And Jeff has said to me more than once, we look at each other like we came from Harvard. When you go to some of the other labels, they're like, not as good as the way Interscope was done. So without a shadow of a doubt, I think that Interscope was a really amazing label when Jimmy was there. And I learned a lot, and I could definitely know how I would do it. But it would mean I'd have to give up record making. And not only that, it also means I would have to stop doing what I'm doing on my other part of my life that I don't talk about, which is consumer electronics.
Well, so you don't want to talk about that?
I'm working with Apple, I work with Facebook, I work with Google, I work with Motorola, SiriusXM, all of that. No one knows I'm doing that, but I'm in all that very deep.
Well,
all the phones, all those Google products, all that stuff, you know, my hand's in all that.
Do you want to talk about that in depth or not?
I think it's kind of a scary thing to talk about. I don't know how people would take
No.
it. I noticed it's a funny thing. What I noticed about musicians is that when I have talked about it, it glosses through them. They don't care. And I think it's so interesting that we're making music the way we are. And it's being consumed not on a pair of whatever speakers that you like, sitting exactly between them in the right room. No one's listening to it that way.
Yeah.
72% of the music we make, let me just say content. And the reason why I want to say content is because I'm talking about films, records, broadcasts, podcasts, everything, any kind of content, right? That's why I want to pick that sort of cold, global corporate word, is consumed for the most part on mobile. So if you talk to most normal people, hey, how do you listen to your stuff? They're listening to it on their phone or their laptop. Maybe they have a smart speaker. Nobody has a great pair of speakers and a big amplifier in a room and they're sitting between it. No one's doing it. That's not how people listen to music.
Yeah. Well, it really...
This room...
Go ahead. Well, all I was going to say is that really it's just following what you've been doing your entire career all the way to the end. Because it used to be able to sort of trust a little bit how people were going to hear stuff. Not completely, but a little bit. And now cars are usually the best sound system anybody owns.
Correct. So it's device mastering is what I call it. If we think about, we used to master, well, not used to, we still do. You go to the mastering guy and the mastering guy, masters the record. And that's a whole nother conversation that we could have about what that is and how that works. But then, if you stop and think about it, a lot of stuff never makes it to the mastering engineer. And there'll come a day where that part of the production thing will be out of the picture. So what happens? It goes straight to the cloud, and someone downloads it. How does that sound?
Yeah.
How does that device know what to do with that file? Does it know what kind of file it is? Does it know how to recognize it? Does it know how to play it back? Chasing tone like we do, and we're chasing emotion and feeling like we do. Then it comes out a small micro speaker. Well, how does that, sound only matters because the conduit between my heart and your heart. And how big that conduit is how much we communicate. And if it's a small little pipe, I only get part of the information. There's nothing to do with, DC to light, bandwidth, beautiful sound, sit down in my glass of wine. No, it's not about any of that. I'm talking about just emotion and feeling. It doesn't have anything to do with that bandwidth, 100%. And work so hard to create that. And then think about how the people that we created.
Oh, just lost you again. There you are. You're sideways, but you're there.
I have that experience. That sucks. Is terrible. Why is this happening?
Because, LA infrastructure, man. It's just not up to snuff, is it?
It really isn't, is it? Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah,
so we're just going to do it like this for a second. How about, how's this? I don't want to interrupt.
Perfect. That's going to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt.
No. It's your show, man.
No, it's actually your show.
Well,
I want to compliment you on something, just because I'm afraid that if I don't say this now, we're talking about so much stuff that might get past us. But I want you to know that I've watched what you're doing with Puremix, and now I'm experiencing it right now in real time. And I really like that you let people speak, because if there's anything I know about Andrew Scheps is you're probably the smartest guy. I mean, your IQ is through the roof.
Wow.
Your force intelligence is like stupid. I mean, you're really beyond. You're smarter than most of us for sure. Just brute force IQ, and you're very experienced, and you're very successful with your plugins, and you know a lot about a lot of things. The way you talk about, well, yeah, that's what the bump is in my plugin. It's actually taken from, the Stones when they. Why have I gone blank on that? I own 4 of them. The equalizer that has the bump at 60.
Oh, the Helios.
Thank you, the Helios. The way you talk about that, it's like you actually know what you're talking about. Like, you actually understand, yeah, well, I want to do this, but I want to double DS it because I want the DS. It's like you actually understand what you're doing. It's like a lot of smartness behind the architecture of what it is, which is demonstration that you actually are a real engineer, you know. And so you have a lot to say is my point with all that. And yet you let people like myself that you ask to come on just go off and listen.
Because I'm fascinated.
A lot of people don't do that. They want to talk. They don't understand that they're asked someone to come on and talk and effectively produce them, which is what you're doing. And I admire that.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. It's exactly what I've been trying to do. I just feel like I'm so lucky because I get to hang out with you, and I hang out with Tony and all these guys. We see each other at NAMM or have Waves dinner and have really long conversations where you get past the kind of initial bits and people start talking about what the motivation is. And I think making records is such a weird, unknowable thing that it takes conversations of this length to actually get to some substance, because sometimes I find people have never actually put the ideas into words before. You have. You're really well spoken about this stuff, but some of the people have never said it out loud. And to get to the point where they actually manage to coalesce their driving force into words, it's a gift to be able to sit here and listen to it. You know, it really is.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate that I get to work with all the different people. So one really cool thing about mixing, as you know, is that you get to work with all kinds of different people, and there's so much to learn. It's really fun. It's really cool.
Yeah. So enough about me. What do you think of me?
Well, I'll let you say that. No, I'm kidding.
So we were getting into the consumer stuff a little bit, which we don't have to, but I do think it's really smart to, because you could sit at home and rail against the fact that people listen to stuff on phones, which is what everybody else who does what we do does. They just get angry about it, whereas you're like, well, no, I'm going to go make that a good experience. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing with all the different things. It's interesting experience because there are two things that are significant for me on it. The first one is, you know, when you're 15 and you're 14, you're 16, you're 17, whatever, and you're coming up, you've got nothing to worry about. What's your life? Your life is like, is my band cool? Do I like this girl I'm going out with? And can I get in the house without my parents knowing I did drugs tonight? I'm just making an example.
For instance.
And that's it. That's all you're thinking about, right? Then as life goes on, life becomes more complicated. And even your listening time is reduced because you're making records and you have to be responsible to listen to the things that you're working on and go back and change things and make them better. So you don't have the same ability to be influenced and listen. In working on some of the consumer devices where I have playlists that are focused on 60 years of music, for instance, right? So that means Calvin Harris has to work, and Weezer has to work, and Sinatra and Bing Crosby have to work, right? One's mono, one's stereo, one has 60 hertz, one has no 60 hertz. One, the bass, at that time, they thought, oh, bass is 120, 250 cycles. They didn't even think about 5 hertz. But meanwhile, The Weeknd and Drake, all they care about is 5 hertz. I'm exaggerating to make a point. So I'm very much exaggerating. So, but what happens with that is that when you have a playlist like that and you're working on something, you're listening so inside because you're like inside it. You're really going inside, listening to every detail of how it's all working. Then all of a sudden it's kind of like, whoa, I'm back to like when I was 17 where such and such record would come out by such and such person. And I would like just listen to it over and over and over and over and try to understand it and get inside it and like, well, I never thought about doing a reverb that does that or a delay that does that. Or I never thought about making this sound like that. Or I never thought about that kind of arrangement. Like, what do you mean the first chorus doesn't have drums in it? You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That's the positive attribute. And then the second positive attribute is seeing again how these companies think, like the record label. how cheap can we make it? If we can find a speaker that we can pay 1 cent for it, let's get that one. You're like, but that one's not good. Yeah, but we can make more money. Yeah, but you understand that a phone or half these consumer products that we're talking about, at the root of what they are is a communication device. And that means they have to feed my ear. So you're obsessed about the battery. You're obsessed about the screen. You're obsessed about whether it's OLED screen or 4K or 8K screen. You want to make sure the battery works from here to New York. You want to make sure it does this. You want to make sure it does that. It has this app, whatever. But what about the way it sounds? Ever thought about the way it sounds? Because maybe somebody even made a kitchen video and they want to hear their baby cry, but they want to hear what the baby really sounds like. Or they want to hear the newscaster, and they can't tell the difference between the NBC newscaster and the Fox one and the CNN one because they kind of all sound the same. And I can't tell if they're bullshitting me because I can't really hear the quiver in their voice, the crack in their voice. I can't hear their personality because you took it away from me. And when I watched my favorite Bruno Mars song or whoever, if I get excited because I hear Doja Cat, and when I go watch the video and I'm like, the video is really cool, but the sound doesn't match the visual, that sucks. That's the world we're in.
Yeah.
And I think the exciting part about them starting to think about and listening, that being Silicon Valley, is because they created the smart speaker, going all the way back to the first one, which would be Alexa, basically. And even though it's still not great, people realized, wait, kind of don't need to put my phone inside of a cup. And I can kind of hear bass. And I can also just say, play communication breakdown or play whatever. It doesn't. Kind of convenient, kind of cool. And it sounds better. And they don't have the reference of what really great consumer product is, like you or I would have and others on this call. So it's starting to wake up people's brain a little bit of like, well, maybe it should sound better. Because right now, the reason why it doesn't sound better is it's not an option. You can't go to the Apple store and say, give me an iPhone 26. They're like, what are you talking about? You mean iPhone 11, right? Oh, you want the 11 Plus. And you thought the plus sign meant that it was a 26. No, I want an Apple 26. No, we don't have that. Kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, and certainly, I mean, obviously with the smart speakers, it's different, but certainly in laptops and phones, I mean, audio is the stepchild. It's whatever room is left. It's like, look, we're going to put a stereo looking grill. We only have room for one speaker. There you go. Do as much DSP as you can to it, and that's it. But it is, I mean, considering, well, and it's also, in a way, hopefully, and this is, you're opening their eyes to this, none of them would have, like iTunes wouldn't have existed, Apple Music wouldn't exist, Google Play wouldn't exist if they weren't making a ton of money off of being content delivery for music. So it's not like other people have shoehorned music into their ecosystem. They have built the ecosystem themselves. So they really should care about how they present it.
Well, remember, hardware doesn't exist without software. The software is the blood. If you take the software, hardware means nothing. And the hardware is nothing without the software. Apple understands that. There are certain companies that understand that the symbiotic relationship between hardware and software is everything. And it's not unlike our business, where we're combining some of the older analog stuff with the new digital stuff, right? Hardware and software together. Why not?
Yeah, but speaker design too now. I mean, it used to be like, yeah, it was just hardware. Crossovers, pick a driver, build your enclosure, and there you go. And I mean, none of these speakers would work without DSP. They can't possibly work. So they'd rip themselves apart with the first kick drum.
You're correct. And as the DSP becomes, the smart amps, which is what they have in these devices, these smart amps look at the transducer and they measure the resistance, the temperature, the excursion, and everything, and they manipulate to protect the speaker, because you have a cheap little speaker that you're asking to do a lot. Yeah. And you can't have the speaker board because then the customer gives a return, and that's a black mark for the company. So the smarter all that gets, the cheaper they make the speaker. Instead of going like, wait, actually, we have technology that could take a little bit better speaker and make it even like kind of better than you would expect. No.
Yeah. And
more margin, more money.
A few of the companies, I think the ones who were just doing speakers, looked at it that way. I mean, I have no idea where they're at now, but years ago I dealt with a bunch of the guys at Sonos, and that really was what they were doing. Like, their idea behind speaker design was the DSP allows us to get low end because we can measure the excursion, so we can push out a huge amount of bass until just before the speaker would rip, and then we can put the brakes on. So soft limit,
Right.
but in a physical way. But they were very much about the sound quality because it's all they were building. And it would be amazing if that became the case across the board for the people who build the stuff we actually listen to music on. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, some brands connect and some don't. And Sonos has been one that really hasn't connected. And I know they really try. But I don't know, it's interesting. Some people just, for whatever reason, gravitate to certain things, right?
Yeah.
Not like TikTok is a new idea. Not really. But it's on the rage.
Yeah.
It's becoming a record company. It's on its way to becoming literally becoming a record company for real. An actual record company.
Amazing.
So I'm already working on stuff that is a TikTok artist. It's not a Geffen artist, an Interscope, a Capital, whatever artist. It's a TikTok artist.
Right. And again, so, I think for years we, as producers and engineers, you sit at home and you rail against the fact that nobody has a good stereo anymore. But you also like, oh, who cares how many likes you've gotten YouTube views and now TikTok followers? That's not real artist. We know what that is. And it's like, wow, no, that is actually real. It's not made up because
Correct.
It's what's happening.
Correct. The one thing I know is the very, 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 very foundation of what we do, which is art, is defined as ever-changing. And people don't understand that. So when I hear people say like, oh, how it used to be, I'm like, I'm done with the conversation. Don't want to have it. There is no how it used to be. You can be affected by those things, but the story of walking through the snow in bad shoes for 10 miles, like, I don't want to hear that story.
Yeah, uphill both ways. Yeah.
I just don't want to hear it. It's because it's just not exciting. It's not fun. Things change. And how we make records and what tools that we have, all those things. Imagine if Mr. Fairchild didn't build a Fairchild. The Beatle record wouldn't sound like that. Toto's Africa would not exist if Yamaha didn't make the synthesizers that they made. That's about then. And Isotope comes along. And Isotope makes stuff like not like Universal and not like Waves. Well, that's fantastic. Isotope has a whole nother brain the way those guys think.
Yeah.
They're like nobody else. Those guys are on another planet. And I look at the stuff they're doing, like, that's really smart. And they look at things in a whole different way. Universal does a whole different thing. Waves has their things that they do. Everyone has their things that they do. Why are we not using it all? Who says it has to be one thing?
It's Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson all over again. He's walking into the room and seeing harpsichords and Rhodes and like, well, that's been done.
But it has its place. Like there's still... I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, if I put a Fairchild on something, a Fairchild or a stay level, or I don't know what to pick, but any of this outboard stuff I have here, the Beetle board here that I have right here, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you that that Beetle board, that's hard to beat. This compression on the guitar, it's ridiculous. There's no plugin that does that. Right? But there's also plugins that don't do that. So why am I not doing both?
Yeah.
Kind of fun.
Yeah.
I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
No, but it's look, it doesn't matter how many times you hear it and from how many different people you need to hear it. So how about this? Because we're coming up on 3 hours, which seems to be my minimum.
Sorry.
No, man, not at all. Do you want to give like a really brief tour of your room? Because I'm sure other people watching this would just... They'll have to change their pants after you show them around a little bit. You want to do like a quick 5?
I'll just show up.
Yeah, just a little 5-minute tour, and then we'll bring Mark on and get some questions.
Not even 5 minutes, 5 seconds. So stay levels, which are really, really cool. I think the stay level, I always kind of nickname it as the bedroom producer compressor. Very loved. And then, there's all of this stuff over here, which is the old API B&B stuff. I don't know if you can, because I'm holding the phone like this, I don't know what you're seeing. There's all the tube preamps.
Yeah.
There's all the Beetle stuff, Presto compressors, Fairchild down there at the bottom, which is what created the Puig child. The Altec stuff, the Mavic preamps, which are Pultec preamps, retarded good. Nothing like an Eventide 2016. That's pretty hard. That's an awesome thing. And then it goes around like this to Patch Bay tube preamps. I don't know if you can see these underneath the patch cords.
Yeah.
You see the tube. Okay, those are TAC preamps. They're on the stereo bus tube. They're designed in a way that it shouldn't work, but they're amazing sounding. The 33264s that you see up there, great. Neve 1079, not 73. RCA amplifiers, crazy good on guitars, very thick for guitar stuff. Your SSL, got to have your SSL, right?
Got to have a 4-channel SSL.
Nothing like an SSL. And then, of course, that white thing you see in the bottom is part of my summing. Alan Smart, 2254s, 1176s, I don't know. RCA, huge RCA monitors up there. I don't know if you can see that. Then it comes all the way around to other stuff on this side here, more hi-fi stuff. Stuff that I'm working on, as you can see here. All kinds of phones, or you manufacture. You see it's all right there.
Right.
So that's Google. These are all stuff I shouldn't actually be showing because they're prototypes.
Yeah, don't show that stuff. Don't worry, it's blurry.
Well, they all look the same. I mean, that's a really fast 2-second version. Great Collins, stay levels, old RCA, Collins console is really great. And there's Electrodyne stuff down there. There's more Meeks stuff down there. There's stuff way over there. API European mic preamps, Collins things up there. There's it just, it goes on and on. There's a lot of stuff. You can't see it all.
So you got some stuff.
Down here too.
And a lot of nicely colored light bulbs as well. And I just saw Marvin the Martian on the floor, which is very exciting.
That was underneath the floor of the drummer every night on a band called Tonic. So every night when they play their show, that was underneath the drum.
Amazing.
And that's why I have it. It's just sort of an emotional memory.
And if you ever need a disintegrator gun. All right, Mark. Come on in. Let's have some questions. And then it's beer o'clock, I think, for me.
Awesome.
Beer
Okay.
o'clock.
I wore out 2 copies of that Tonic record on CD. Okay. So our first question, most upvoted, is how do you deal with the balance between clarity and coloration in a mix?
Interesting question. I think that the best way to look at it is to understand which components in that mix are the color and which ones are the clarification. I think I said that right. Is it clarification? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Clarity?
Yeah.
The clarity
and coloration.
Yeah.
Clarity and coloration.
Yeah. So, maybe there's certain things in that mix that should really be the color of something, something that you have, that you hear it and you don't forget it. Let me give you an example. What I mean by that is a great record you can hear in your head. So if I said to you, Michael Jackson, I Want to Rock With You, you can hear that snare fill in your head right now, and you can hear that record. You can hear that record in your head. If I said, Berlin, Take My Breath Away, you see the movie and you hear the bass. You hear that bass. Or if I said Paul Young, you hear that bass. Or if I said to you, I don't know what to pick. But the point is, you hear records, when they're really great, you can hear them in your head. And so the object is, what things are the color that are the 2 or 3 things that are the anchor of that record that you want people to remember? What is that? And what things need to be clear because they're supportive to that color. So being that everything is relative, left, right, up, down, close, far, sweet, sour, male, female, you have to have color and clarity to appreciate both, and they empower each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
Absolutely. That's a really good answer. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Next one is from Toby. And Toby says, question for Mr. Puig. I love how the acoustic guitar sounded in the song Daughters by John Mayer. How did you mic that guitar and later treat it in the mix?
Okay. So a large part of the why that guitar sounds like it sounds is going back to what Andrew and I have been talking about today, which is detail. So what does that mean? Well, if I knew I was going to do this, I would have it ready. I don't have it with me in this room right now. I can do it quickly. But what I would do is I'd pull out a box of probably 75 different picks. So I can collect microphones, I can collect instruments, but I can also collect picks. So John and I would spend a lot of time what kind of pick is he using? And where is that pick? Is it towards the front? Is it towards more back to the back bridge? Is it on a 45-degree angle? Is it on a 90-degree angle? Once that's done, because remember the sound starts at the instrument. So once you have the instrument right, and be lucky to work with a musician that knows how to play the sound of the instrument, right? There's the instrument, and then what sound do I make with it? I'm not talking about the chords. I'm not talking about the musical part. I'm talking about actually like what tone can I make with the same instrument? What tone can I make with it? If I do it like this, or if I angle it like this, how much, I'd be working with John and be like, John, lean back. What do you mean? You're on top of the acoustic guitar, you're killing it. If I lay on top of the acoustic, I'm killing it, I'm muting it. You have to come back and let it breathe so it can vibrate. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. Once you go through those kinds of processes, then it's like, okay, as I said earlier to Andrew, I took plywood, 3 pieces of 8x4 plywood, and I put them behind him, right? And plywood on the floor so that I had a real good, strong, as I said earlier, I could focus like this when I put my hands around my mouth, a real focused, clean mid-range, right? Then I use a U47 because it's got a lot of body, that microphone, in my opinion. And I would use a Scheps microphone that was real bright, CM5, and I would combine the two. So I had the top end of one of them, and I had the low end of the other one. And then an API mic preamp on one, because APIs are very bright, and they have a certain kind of wiry clarity that nothing else has. And then the need for the bottom end.
Wow.
Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah, I think the picks
memory.
can't be overstated. I mean, obviously the guitar player and the guitar, but like Joe Barisi's got a fishing tackle box with hundreds of different picks. And
100%.
he will dive into it and hand the guitar player a pick every time. And it's transformative.
And sometimes it's just a Fender medium. You're like, how can I not just beat a Fender medium? It's like, I don't know, it just works.
Yeah.
But my friend John Bryan went on a tour trip in Europe once years ago, and he brought me back a whole bunch of different kinds of picks he got from all different countries in Europe.
Yeah. Are you grabbing specific ones based on what you're hearing, or are you just kind of, with that many picks, are you just kind of saying, here, try this, or? No,
what it is you learn, if you're really good at your craft, you learn what things sound like. Mm-hmm. So you learn like, if I put a Focusrite plugin on, I noticed that if I turn down the input on a Focusrite plugin, really changes the color. Something about the way their algorithm is working. So now, okay, I identify that now as a color, right? Or I know what this compressor sounds like. I know what it'll do if I put it on this. Or this particular aspect of this particular plugin. And same thing with the picks. You learn the picks. You're like, okay, I know what that pick sounds like. And you hear the musician play, and you basically are EQing the instrument before you turn on a microphone effectively. So you learn the different ones. You're like, oh, okay, those strings are a little bit older, or it's a Martin that's kind of thick. It's an okay sounding guitar, but I've got this one pick that's real bright. And I'll just give it to him and ask him to play with that pick. And then I've just EQ'd the guitar.
Right.
Because the microphones are supposed to be capturing the sound. Remember, the sound starts in a musician's hand and in the instrument and in that environment. So I like to treat things acoustically before I even bring the microphone.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
In a perfect world.
Right. Right. With time and yeah.
Just going to turn my camera so we can see Squid, because Squid's hanging out.
Can you guys see me okay? I just threw the camera down.
Yep,
Yes.
all good. Perfect.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yes, you and my
Both you and
cat are
Squid
both,
are, yeah.
both showing up perfectly.
Awesome. Okay, next question is from Russ Miller. And he says, "Hi guys, thanks for doing this. Any advice for keeping focus on the song's emotion, whether mixing and making the mix feel good, rather than getting caught up in the sonic minutia? I struggle with that a lot."
I think, to be honest, I hate that term, to be honest. Does that mean you're lying before? It's so stupid. The truth is, experience is the best fight against that. So I can't tell you how many times I've been putting gas on my car at 1 a.m. going, this mix is not right. And calling the guys up and saying, pull it all up, I'm coming back. Dude, we locked everything down. I don't care. Turn everything on. I'm coming back. It's not right. There's no way these people are coming tomorrow at 11 a.m. to this shit, right? And so the point of that is you can be so obsessed with, is it banging on the bottom? Is the vocal really like bright and sparkly and exciting and pop sounding? Is it great? And do I have the internal instruments balanced, right? And do I need to EQ this? The truth is, once you get experience, you get good at it. You really have it together in pretty much 30 minutes. If we're really honest, you have the mix most of the time within 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And after that, you're just doing it for yourself, kind of. And that's a very, not a popular, I probably should have not said that, but it's kind of the truth. Meaning that my reason why I say that is that your initial instinct is usually right. So I've spent the last decade listening to my instinct in my life. What do I mean by that? If I'm sitting someplace and I have a cup of coffee and I'm like, dude, you should move that cup of coffee, because you know what? If you were to slide around just right, that could fall right into your such and such piece of equipment and it'll destroy it. No, I'm not going to do that. I know the coffee's there. Your phone rings and you realize it's over here and you go to grab it and you knock the coffee and you're like, shit, I knew that was going to happen. Didn't listen to your instinct. If I walk and I see a penny on the floor, have respect for money. Pick up that penny. That's what your instinct tells you to do. Your intellect goes, that's a penny. Who cares about that? No. Listen to your instinct. Pick up the penny. And by the way, while you picked up that penny, that might have been enough to slow you down for 3 seconds before the bus that was going to hit you on the street. Your instinct is the most powerful thing that you have. You listen to your instinct, so you grow it. This sounds weird what I'm saying to you, because I'm not saying to you the answer is 1176. What I'm saying, the answer is growing your instinct. That tells you, like, that's what it should be. And your intellect goes like, no, it's not like, it doesn't have as much bass as such and such song that I think is really cool right now. Well, that's that song. This is this song. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. But my
if I'm not
instinct
answering
says
the
to put
way you want to
1176
answer, if I'm not answering
No,
the way
I
you
think
want to
that's
answer,
great. That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing I would add just as a tool is perspective. Don't sit in front of a mix unless you're in one of those creative trances where you're not really going to remember what you did anyway. As soon as you're laboring to finish it, all you're going to do is remember all the stuff you did, and then that's all you're going to listen to. So you've got to somehow get perspective. So close it, listen to something else, check your email, but don't sit there staring at it until you think it's done, because then you'll never know if it's done. You can't hear it.
Now, I will say this, though. Now, here's the flip side. I agree with Andrew 100%. But I'm gonna flip it for a second, because I've gone through this thing that you guys are talking about myself, and I still do, by the way. Sometimes the struggle is good. sometimes saying to yourself, that is not effing good enough. And if you think that you're worth it, you're a piece of garbage. That's got to be better. And sometimes that struggle can make it better. But more times than not, what Andrew said is correct.
Well,
I
think it's you've got to get to the place where you hear it honestly enough to know that it's not good enough. And sometimes that's really difficult when you just sit in front of it. At least for me, I've got to get away and come back. And it's when I hit play, I know within 5 seconds that I haven't gotten it yet. But if I would just sat in front of it, I might think I'm getting there, and think I'm getting there, and think I'm getting there.
And this comes back to the bigger picture, which is we all lie to ourselves. It's a very common thing. It's also being honest with yourself and not lying to yourself. And listening to that instinct you just said, where you hear it in 5 seconds, you're like, that ain't right. Okay, it's not right. And that's okay. By the way, you don't always get it right. It's the truth.
Yeah, I love that you said this in a different interview, that it's a job if you're mixing, and if you're mixing like on a schedule, the idea that you're going to be able to be artistically awesome every single day with different source material is kind of insane. You know,
it's retarded.
Yeah, but that's the gig.
Yeah, but do you think there's a quarterback or a base or a pitcher that nails every game? I don't think so. It's called batting average.
No, look at double headers in baseball. To me, is like the biggest thing. You get a team that come out, win by 20 runs, go into the dugout for 40 minutes, come out for the second game, lose by 20 runs. Like everything's the same except the starting pitcher. Same guys are starting the game. So yeah, you gotta play the game. You got to do the mixes, and you can't win every one.
And the other thing to consider, last thing I'll say, is that we're fortunate that we're working in this time of the music business from the standpoint that we have total recall. That's made us be artists, where before the person could sing the song again, or they could play a solo again, or whatever it is, they could do it again. We didn't get to do it again when we first started. Now it's like, no, you can do it again, recall. In fact, before you finish mixing, they're asking, so on the recall, look, I haven't got the files yet. I know. But when we get to the recall, which means that you get to try shit.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Right.
It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another, as far as like, going off of instincts and trusting all of that, you've also talked in the past about how you're feeling things, like you're even using your sense of touch on the console, and
yes,
all that just being dialed in.
Yes, completely. Very much. The speakers will tell you what's going on if you listen to them. Mm-hmm. So I worked on a very successful record that was made by a very successful producer and a very successful engineer that I ended up mixing because they couldn't figure it out. Part of it was because they had recorded a lot of things through synthesizers and things, so they had subsonic frequencies going on. And so the first clue was when the band said to me, yeah, this guy's the coolest producer. I go, why? He goes, we go through a pair of Venice 10s every day. I was like, you go through a pair of Venice 10s every day? The speakers are telling you something's wrong. You're not listening. You're not listening to the speakers. They're your friend. They're trying to help you.
Yeah, not when they're on fire, they're not.
Right.
But, they're telling you something.
Fireworks every day.
And what they're telling you is, I can't reproduce 2 hertz all day. Sorry, I can't do it. I can't do DC. Right. But they weren't smart enough to understand what the speakers were telling them, or what it feels like, or your pants, how they feel against your leg. I mean, you got to feel it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something I started paying a lot of attention to after I saw that interview. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so our next question is from Mo. And Mo says, please talk about your approach to compression, Mr. Puig, specifically with respect to changing the feel of a part.
God, I said to myself I was going to talk about that today because I thought people are probably just absolutely want to shoot themselves in the head if I talk about that one more time. But I think that compression is the most musical thing we have, because it's the only thing that moves, it has a time constant. So it's the only thing that you can actually move things in the bar line time-wise. Where equalization is static. It's not dynamic. Music is dynamic, as we know. So it's a very long explanation, frankly. So the last mix of the masters I actually came out with at, I guess that was NAMM. Yeah, NAMM. I actually brought with me big pieces of paper where I wrote out and I showed actually peak-to-peak information, RMS information, square waves, where things fit in the bar line, and how you can move those things to each other. Remember, I said everything is relative.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's something that that it's not an easy thing to respond to. It takes a minute to explain it right, and you have to illustrate it.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
But I think
are there?
I think you could sort of. I mean, this is a gross generalization, though, but that you should. One of the things I think that's great about the 1176 is how versatile it is while keeping stuff pretty simple. So take any 1176 style plugin or piece of gear or whatever, and just sit and learn the attack and release time and how they affect things, because they're completely different in how they affect things. And I think that will start to give you a sense of compression as a way to shape the way something hits you emotionally in a track or even soloed up. Because what you could do to a snare drum or a vocal with an 1176, it's insane how far you can go. Stay in the same ratio, just pick a ratio, it doesn't matter. Just with attack and release, you will completely transform it.
But you use the word emotion. And what I think he's referring to is when I talk about time. So actually how it affects the front end of the note. So the perception of the front end of the note. So if you have a very aggressive peak thing, the ear identifies, oh, that's exactly right there. And you can say that's the second eighth note of that bar, or you can say it's so many ticks or so many, anything, however you want to measure, whatever metrics you want to pick, right? And then depending on the next thing where its attack or release is how they relate to each other. So are they banging at the same time, or is one a little before it, a little afterwards? So in the pre-Pro Tools, when you would mix records and make records, musicians had a feel of where they would play. So you'd have a band, they're like, I don't know what it is, man. Those four guys play together, it's magic. And you're like, well, yeah, it's because basically he kind of lays back, and the guitar player, he's really on top of the beat. But if you listen to the guitar player's right hand, it locks with the drummer's hi-hat. So all the eighth notes have this one cool feel, and the bass guy, he's kind of behind it. So it kind of supports the excitement of those eighth notes pushing the beat, right? You analyze it like that. And then you're like, okay, so that's how you would mix it. But then when you got to everything being put on the grid, that's gone now. Everything's on the grid. So how am I going to move that? Well, I can go in and move it, literally copy and paste and move things, or I can use compression and have the compression move the things and make that feel that those guys used to have in that as when they play together as a team. That's what we're talking about. It's a whole nother art of compression. And even once you understand that, then you got to understand what the different kinds of compressors do. And then you pick different compressors because you know the feel that they make in terms of how they can put something in the bar line. It's in a total another world. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actual groove, not just pulse. Yeah. Awesome. Are there other videos people can check out online of you discussing that?
No, I should probably someday make one and make illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
I showed at NAMM, I took the Bee Gees song Staying Alive and I illustrated it on that. And it was pretty mind-blowing.
Awesome.
What you were able to change from the feel. Like, that didn't just happen. Yeah, that happened. Let me show you again. Like, I'm not lying. Watch this. It's incredible.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
The art of compression. It's not about L1 and how loud I can make it. That's not compression. That's bullshit. That's amateur.
Mm-hmm.
Compression is all about feel. And it's not about making a snare ping and smacking it. And no, that's toys. That's kid stuff. What I'm talking about is the art of compression. And it's really involved, and you would have to really show examples of it to understand it. I'm serious. It's taken me years to understand it and master it. And I still don't have it figured out.
Sounds like you're on the way.
I'm trying.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, we'll watch out for that in the future. That's really intriguing. Okay, so next question. James McLean asks, when you're balancing, are you focusing on peaks and transients or the average volume?
Both. So again, it comes back to what is balance? Balance is volume. What's EQ? Different kinds of volumes. Still volume, still level. So when that goes, the way I always look at that is, if you're talking about balancing, can you ask the question one more time? Because he used a particular term I want to use.
Yeah. When you're balancing, are you focused on peaks and transients or the average volume?
Okay, that's why to make sure that I was going to say RMS instead of average, but so that's why I wanted to ask. Average, when you're balancing the average level, I look at that as sort of like that's the that's just the normal balance job, for lack of a better description. Let me kind of like stumble through this. But then I look at, okay, I want to go to the expert page. So if I click on expert to go down to the next page, it's like, oh, I can balance transients. How loud is the transient on the snare, the pop on the snare, compared to the click of the hi-hat or the sibilance of the voice? So this on the voice, and there's a hi-hat, right? And there's a on the snare. Those are a balance too. Then you go down to like, well, what's the balance on the low end of the bass drum and bass, those lower frequencies? How is the length of those notes balancing? Not the tax of them, but the duration of those notes. So balance is many, 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 many levels.
But also, I want to...
Panning is balance.
Just in case, because I'm a little worried that this question is like, if I put an analyzer on it and see what the number is, then I know to make either all the peaks the same or all the RMSs the same. And that's just lining up numbers. This is all by ear. This is like what makes the song work. So if you're looking for a process to mathematically do the balance for you, I think you should not go down that road at all, ever.
Well, our ears are the most resolute of all of it. We were made of 30 senses, but we only talk about 5 in pop culture. But our ears by far the most resolute. Our eyes are actually dumb. They're dead, 15% dead center. And they don't even go out. Remember, your ears go 360. And when you go to sleep tonight, your ears don't go to sleep. Your eyes go off, your ears stay on. They never go off. They're by far the most resolute of the senses. So you do have the ability to get the skill of learning, like, okay, I want to listen into this. I want to listen to it more. I want to listen to the tail of those reverbs. Like, how's that work? You can get way down in the weeds if you want to in that skill set. You can, and that's valid.
Oh yeah. In terms of focusing your hearing,
lost.
Absolutely.
But you can get lost.
But the idea of a good balance isn't that everything is the same level. That's not. That's leveled. That's not a balance in like a song balance. So I just want to make sure whoever is asking the question isn't asking for like the how can I figure out a method to balance without listening kind of thing based on levels. I hope that's not what it is, but I've seen, it's only reason I bring it up is I've seen people talk about that, about like, you don't even need to turn the speakers on. Yeah.
Put it on an analyzer.
Set all the stuff so that each fader is coming at this level and that will be your starting point for your balance. And I think that's just a dangerous way to kid yourself that you've got a starting point where faders down is a really good starting point.
Of course that is. Absolutely.
Well, to expand on that, let's say that your fader's down, and you bring up the first element of your mix. I don't know. Do you guys both go to the same one, or like what do you go to first, Andrew?
Well, I mean, look, in the old days, you would really start kind of kick and snare and look at your VU meters for your mix bus, and you'd try to make sure that that would set your boundaries for kind of where the mix was going to go. But still, everything would creep up. You'd trim stuff down. You'd pull the mix bus down, whatever. I don't worry that much about it anymore, and I will generally start with the equivalent of a yardstick mix. I'll kind of push everything up. And then because Pro Tools is so great at organizing with VCAs and things, I can very quickly build a little balance of the drum kit, and now I've got one fader that's the drum kit, and then I can build the balance between the bass amp and the bass DI, and okay, now I've got, so I'm sort of zooming out and out so that I can do big picture balances, but you've got to do the balance of the sort of elements as well. But you can only go so far if you don't have everything in, because obviously, like, if you want to build the track up, the vocal is the most important thing. But if you start with just the vocal, well, you don't have any context for the vocals. So it's kind of an everything all at once to a point. And then once I've got stuff sort of close, then I can take lots of stuff back out and focus on individual things if I want to, see the relationship between, as Jack's saying, like just the bottom end of the kick and the bass. Like, can I really hear what both of them are doing? Who's rhythmically driving the bus? Who's melodically driving the bus down there? And do all of that. But that completely out of context, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Just a really tiny example of this is I had to do, and it was a test mix and I didn't get the gig, but it was a Dixie Chicks song. So you've got three very, very strong singers, and this was not a song where one of them was singing lead. And I was having a really hard time getting the balance because they're all dynamic. It was dynamic recording. I didn't want to just crush them. So I said, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to ride each vocal as if it's a lead vocal with the other two off, and then see where that gets me. And it took me a long time, and then I turned all three of them on, and it was total shit. It was so horrible. And I just like, all right, that's it. Let's start the vocals over completely and just push the faders up until I didn't have to touch them. And that actually worked for about 80 or 90% of the song, and I just had to ride a few things here and there. But it's because I hadn't actually ever gotten a balance that worked. And I was trying to figure out, like, what's my method to make this work without listening? And there wasn't one. It was so horrible. I can't tell you how bad that was. And that was in a studio, like paying for time with an assistant watching me. And yeah, that was bad.
It's a good experiment.
Well, yeah, you live, you learn.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
Jack just lost your video again.
I'll fix it.
Anyway, couple more. What do you think, Jack? Two more?
Yeah, no, whatever you guys want.
Great.
Well, I could
Jack,
just
I'm
go get a
curious,
beer, then we could go all night, actually.
Okay.
You'd be
All right,
sad.
Are we back?
We're back.
You're back. I'm going to go get a beer. You asked this question.
Cool.
Here.
Okay, cool. Jack, I'm curious, how do you start a mix? If you're either you've got it in or you produced it, are you faders down and finding an element, or?
Well, I will say, I'll make a confession. I'll say something I shouldn't say to the guy who asked the question. And I'm sorry that I don't remember your name, not being rude. But believe it or not, if you really want to get a little bit cerebral about it, pretty much if you start with the kick and bass at -5, that'll work. Now, I'll deny that I said that.
Yeah.
Because that's so like geeky and techie. But some of those guys we talked about earlier on in the call, they were mentors. They told me that, and I tried it, and it works.
Yeah.
So generally working, you can go to -5, just general. That's not going to work every time, but it'll work a lot. Now, I actually don't do that, by the way. I can't remember the last time I did that, but I just remembered that from past experiences. As far as what I do, I think I'm just so interested in detail and just how things connect, and me just always looking for that ultimate feel, that I just don't think in terms of like grouping things so much. I really I have a different approach than Andrew's. I'm trying to think of how I would describe it, but I don't do anything like that. I don't even think like that. It might be, as I'm trying to figure out why I don't think like that. It's because, you know what, I don't for the most part work on SSL. And SSL was always about, hey, you've got these drum channels and you assign them all to this group because it's easy. You have 8 groupers right in front of you, right? It's very much an SSL mentality. And I don't have an SSL mentality. Maybe that's why I don't look at it that way. Of course, I do ship Apple to G. Of course I use groups. And of course I have master faders and things. But I look at things much more, very individual, very much the pieces, how the pieces make the whole. Not so much the whole, but the pieces. And as far as how I start, I always clear everything up very quickly. And the reason why I do that is because we already have the rough, right? And these days you're getting very excellent roughs.
Mm-hmm.
So I already know what the song kind of is based on the rough, right? Or at least their impression of what the song is. So I like to throw things up quickly and go, where are the problem spots? And let me tactically go in and fix those problem spots. So then when I pull the faders back down, I can just mix. I don't have to worry about, when they edited the vocal, there's all these ticks, like they didn't crossfade right. And they didn't know how to crossfade in Pro Tools quite right. And, they separated the vocals, but this vocal goes over this vocal slightly, but you wouldn't hear it if it was in the track. But if you have a great ear and a great system, you identify problem spots. So I like to fix all that first.
Right.
And once I have that all fixed, if I get something that's really terrible sounding, like a really bad bass or a really bad vocal or a really bad loop or whatever it is, or shitty 808, I want to first kind of get that in the ballpark. So then I can do what ultimately really matters, which is the balance. That's
right.
it. That if there's anything to learn from any of this, you can't balance, you ain't doing anything.
Yeah.
Period. Undisputed. I guarantee you the best people in the business would say that. Guarantee it.
There
Nobody
used
would
to
argue.
be one of the things that I actually really did like about analog tape was when you'd make, I'm afraid you don't even want to call it a slave reel anymore because it's not right, but you'd fill up your first tape and you're going to make a second tape to do overdubs on. So you'd just throw up faders and put down a stereo mix of whatever's on that first tape. And those are some of the best mixes I've ever done in my entire life, is a 5-second mix of 24 tracks of stuff and then put it on the other tape. And there's something great about that balance where you're not EQing, you're not doing anything, you're just balancing. And it's
the way I
genius.
did that. The way I did that is, as soon as I was done with recording that particular track, the first thing I did is I put up the other tape, turn everything off, bounce the drums, bounce this, bounce that, right away. That's the first thing I always did because that was the first impression. And if nothing else, I want a photograph of what that was when I wasn't thinking about that. And when we were all excited jumping at the birth. Why were we jumping at the birth? And the amount of times that has saved me, I can't tell you. Same thing with vocal performances. The first thing I do when you record the track, hey, I lie. Can you go out there and just do a couple scratch vocals for me, just so I have something while we're doing overdubs to be able to hear. The real truth is, he's the most excited right now, and I want to get 5 performances, and I'll bet you 2 of those end up being a good part of it every time. It's never let me down yet. Yeah. And the other great trick, bass at the very end. That's how McCartney did a lot of the Beatle records. If you have the whole track up and you're like, okay, turn off the bass. Now, as a bass player, play to that. How would you play to all those parts? How would you play to that? How would you play around all that stuff? If you were doing the bottom end and you're the interval between you and the core, and you empower the core. So you play 1, 3, 5, and whatever that bottom note here is, says what that chord is. And once it spells out what that chord is, it spells out the melody. And once the melody is spelled out, the lyrics are powerful, and you're off to the races. So what if, after it's all said and done, you play the bass to that? I can't tell you how many times that's worked for me as a record producer.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Sorry, that's not the question you asked.
No, that's a really
all right. We can answer whatever questions we want, really.
I'm just as you can tell, I love this business.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. Look, some of my favorite spots on records are when you get to the outro of a song, and then the bass player goes to the third instead of the root, and it reharmonizes the entire track. And it just, for me, emotionally, that's like, And it took me years to even figure out, he's going to the third. And now I've done it a couple of times, and stuff I've worked on. It's genius. A good bass player.
Arif Mardin.
Yeah.
Arif Mardin's the one that taught me that.
Amazing. It's great.
Arif Mardin's whole thing, 100%, all his arrangement is about where is the left hand as it relates to the chord.
Right.
Period. And he said that's a Bach thing. He got that from Bach. That's what he
right.
told me.
Oh boy!
Study Bach.
My cat is destroying my couch right now.
Sorry about that. All right, what's your next question?
Okay.
Come on, Squid.
Cool. I just got 2 massive takeaways from that last one. That was great. So, thank
One
you.
is don't have Squid over if you have a couch that you like.
He's waiting for you to turn around in the background there.
All right, anyway.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right. So our next question is from Lauren Passarelli. And she says, not many mentors talk about imaging, panning, depth, width, and height. What do you both naturally do with this? Did I read that too fast? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I can answer that or answer you to you if you want to answer it.
No, you go.
Okay.
Do you have an
So
answer?
panning to me is a big deal. I don't think that we overall, all of us, use panning as much as we should. Of course, Hendrix records are beyond panned up the rear end, right? They're panned like crazy. They'd be the extreme, and in a good way. That's a compliment, not a bad thing. Depth can be done different ways. All the obvious things like delays and compression, reverbs, but compression's another one. So if you have something that's very much in your face and you have something that's not in your face, you just created 3D. And that's what the 70s records have. So if you think about those 70s records, they have a lot of 3D. You can listen into them. They feel like they go in. Starting in the 80s when we brought on SSL and a lot of compression, we did what I call implied space, implied power, but not real power. The 70s records move the speakers. They actually move air. They live in that 200, 250 hertz range. It's like you got to have power. You got to have torque. Where the 80s records are a mental thing. They're not a pelvic thing. They tell you they're big because of the reverb and the delays and the way they compress things, but they're not really big. They're actually small. So there's the real power and implied power. The real power is how you get the 3D, because if you mix it with implied power where something is close and something's far, then you have the perception, right, of something having depth. So when they say hello, 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 that's far away. That's how the ear perceives it.
Right.
So that's the depth. Also, spending a lot of time in learning how to understand harmonic generators have a lot to do with depth. The more complex the harmonic makeup is, the more the ear perceives what I call the rainbow of sound. Harmonics are the rainbow of the sound. They're the height and the depth and the beauty. They're not the crux of the sound. They're the lipstick. They're the makeup. I'm not saying that because you're a female. I'm just saying it because it just came to my head. I got to be careful. I don't want to take anything wrong. That's how I'd answer that question.
I think, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think panning in terms of like finding your sort of stereo field to place things in if they're not going to move. Everybody's different with that. When I mixed on my Neve, I had a button for the left speaker and a button for the right. And I mixed basically LCR because when I switched the pan circuit in, I didn't think it sounded as good. It was really just quieter. It's just a resistor, but it made me feel like it didn't sound as good. So I didn't use them. So I didn't pan. It
actually doesn't.
I never panned anything. Every once in a while, I would bring stuff out of a stereo pair so that I could pan it because I'd pan it in Pro Tools, or pan it with level. But depth, I think a great resource is, and I'm sure there's an amazing Wikipedia article about it, is just read up on psychoacoustics. And what you'll do is you'll learn how your brain decides how far away stuff is. So if you want something to sound further away, take away the top end. Put echo or reverb on it, because that's what stuff sounds like when it's further away from you. So just with EQ, you can create a huge amount of depth. And it's why a lot of times while recording background vocals, if the lead singer is singing the background vocals, use a lower fi mic. Don't get full frequency background vocals. I've said this before, so I'm just repeating myself. But that kind of stuff will immediately give you 3D for free, because your brain gives it to you, because that's how you've evolved to understand where stuff is in the acoustic field. Height is a weird one. And I think a really interesting way to mess with it is with some of the binaural encoders for like Dolby Atmos and the Sony 360 and stuff like that. Because what they try and do is give you head transfer functions for what happens when stuff is above versus below. But really, I think most people hear low end as being lower than top end. And making something a little bit brighter can move it up in sort of the perceived sound stage. That's the easiest way to do it, is with just EQ. Other than that, it's hard because height is really difficult, especially in headphones. It's almost impossible.
We're not there yet with height.
Yeah.
The truth is we're not there yet.
No.
It's just call it
so the
what
way
it
you
is.
fake
we're not
it.
there yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
You fake it with EQ. You want it to sound like it's lower, take some top end off. You want to sound like it's higher, take some low end off and add some top, and that will help move stuff around.
But I think what she's asking about is what I would call positional audio.
Mm-hmm.
This is important primarily in gaming, right? That's where it really matters, because that makes a difference of whether you get shot or not. Which means
Well,
the game
and also what you were saying before about panning in terms of motion, there is nothing that makes your brain pick stuff up more than it moving. So if you've got a part that you want to bury, but you want people to hear it if they want to hear it, have it wiggle a little bit, have it move, do that kind of thing, because you'll immediately be able to pick it out, but you won't necessarily have to turn it up.
There's the Waves plugin. It's going to come to me in a minute. That's sort of like a motion plugin. And help me if you know.
I think it's called Motion.
Well, there's the Brower
Michael
Motion
Brower's,
one.
or...
No, not Brower. No.
I use I use the NX headphone modeling as a spatial panner in that way.
Yeah, this is a different one. And it's one of the older ones, way back from the very beginning.
S1 Imager or Paz?
No, I know all those, but this one has a movement.
It's yeah.
I use it a lot. I don't know why I've just gone blank on it, but my reason
it's
why I wanted to bring it up,
Mondo Mod.
Mondo Mod, that's it.
Oh yeah.
Mondo Mod is cool because when you have something moving like that, not only is it going from left and right, it's sort of disappearing for a moment as it moves, and it can give the perception that it's moving far away and coming close. And I always have a Mondo Mod going on in 2 and 3 in a mix.
Like the Cyclosonic Panner used to do. Yeah, it does a really cool 360 circle thing.
That Cyclosonic plugin, that thing was an amazing thing. They're hard to come by. Yeah. I never got one. I wish now I did. They were really good for that. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. We got one more?
Yeah, up to you guys. Cool.
I'll stop when you guys tell me you want to stop.
Well, I got a beer, so we could do two. Let's say two more.
I'll stop when you tell me to. You decide.
Okay, let's see here.
Or I could just go to bed and leave you streaming. I mean,
Oh, it's late. It's late where you are, isn't it?
It's not too bad. Just after 11. It's all right.
Oh my God.
No, that's okay. But what is going on with Squid?
Forget that.
Are you?
Like, why are you on this thing still? It's 11 o'clock. I'm gonna tear this couch up.
That's what it is. Yeah, get the hell off.
Yeah. Okay. So this next one is from Matt Weinger, and he says, "Hey Jack, how often are you switching monitors and volume level while mixing, and what do you like to stay on for the bulk of the work?" He says, "Also, thank you so much for sharing so many techniques with me back in the day. Your knowledge and advice has been hugely influential to me throughout the years."
It was a band that I worked with on Geffen.
Awesome.
And Matt, I'm assuming this is a true story, but I was told Matt doesn't have good eyesight. Back then, he didn't have good eyesight, but he loved to play baseball. And the way he would play as the catcher is by listening to the ball. That's what his ears were like.
Good God.
Wow.
He could hear where the ball was coming. That's the kind of ears he had. Matt had stupid ears when we made that record with that band. He made me crazy because I knew he could hear shit that I wasn't hearing. I haven't thought about that in years, but that's a true confession. I listen at a lot of different levels. Obviously, 96 and 97 are a very accurate place to listen. I think a lot of people like to listen very low, and I understand why, because you take the room acoustics out, you take the distortions of the amplifier and speakers out, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Plus, you can hear real good time and pitch at a low level. But I also think a low level can be deceiving if you're not careful. It can make you think you have things that you don't. So I think it's really important to listen at different levels. Extremely important. Harshness and some things that are not pleasant to the ear will not show up at a low level for the most part, generally speaking. And when you crank it up, that's when you're gonna be like, oh, that's not a pleasant listen, right? So I think you need to listen at different levels. If I can't listen at different levels and be happy, I don't have it. I have to be able to listen at any level and be like, this is fucking banging. And if I can't say it to myself, I don't got it. And every time I've done that, I've been right in terms of making something that really translates everywhere really well.
I've been saying for years that I only listen really loud and really quiet for those reasons. Like the really loud gives me one set of things, the really quiet gives me another. And as of about 2 weeks ago, I'm now listening at moderate levels most of the time. And I don't know why that changed, but there was too much stuff that I was missing. Whereas I didn't used to miss the stuff before, but it just, completely changed.
Well, think about listening at a moderate level, right? First of all, that's how most people listen. Secondly, if it's not satisfying at a moderate level, you really don't have it.
Yeah.
Because things can be very satisfying at a low level, right? You can be listening really low and like really enjoying it and hearing all the detail and it's cool. And loud, of course, is exciting.
Yeah.
But what happens when you're in the middle where you're not getting something for nothing? Like the truth. No fluorescent lights are on. This is what it really looks like. I can see every scratch on my face, every pimple. That's when they're really seeing it. What does it really sound like?
Yeah.
Am I satisfied?
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Is that the one?
Well, one
You
more.
said two. Cool.
Okay. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, I'm going to give you the choice of question for this.
We're just going to answer them both then.
Yeah, there's no choice. That's
just give us both of them. Give us
all
both.
Right, all right, here we go. All right, so first one, Lee Hudson. Hi, Jack. Could you tell us what is your favorite compressors for vocal and bass and guitar? Many thanks.
Okay. No, this batter thing, whatever it is that.
Yeah, batter's
right?
box.
Batter's
box.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite compressor for vocal. Let me answer this first. I will answer that. No, okay, I'll just answer it. Favorite guitar compressor. Ugh, God, it's so hard to pick one for anything. Maybe Desert Island is a better way to. Desert Island maybe is the way to look at it. Probably a Fairchild for a vocal. If I had to pick one thing, if I just had to pick one thing. And for a guitar, probably 1176 or 2254E if I had to pick something. And for bass, if I had to pick something, I don't know. It's hard for bass. It's so many different things. It's hard to pick one thing, I gotta say. I fail at better. I'm not good at the batter thing. Not.
See, I'd
Auto wins.
swap the vocal and guitar, because I go Puig Child plugin on guitars, electric or acoustic. There's a way to do it, and there's something great it brings out about like the fingers on the strings. And I'm 1176 on vocals all day long. Definitely.
I think 1176, no matter what you pick, if you use 2 compressors, is a great tag compressor. It's the one that's really great to have at the end. And so, you know, a lot of people will use a compressor like a tube compressor of any kind, whatever it is. I've never been a tube tech person at all because I grew up with the ones before. Those are just copies of the real thing. But if you use any of those tube compressors, the truth is, you know, a lot of them are very slow in a good way, and you can make them really hold a note. And that 1176 is fast. And sometimes if they hand the vocal to both of them, you can get great stuff. A lot of people do that. They'll use both.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to pick one.
Yeah.
All right. Last
Cool.
Here
But
it is.
let me just say one more thing. I'll say one last thing. Like an MV2. An MV2 is unbelievable on a vocal, what you can do with an MV2 or a guitar. Phenomenal what you can do. We're not even talking about that. I mean, this is the problem with answering this question is like, what about all the plugins? Anyway, go on.
Well, exactly. Like I would choose Puig Child. That's my
Right.
Fairchild now, because I don't own a Fairchild and I don't use gear for mixing.
Well, on that note, Lyburn asks or says first, I tried to avoid asking about plugins, but since Jack brought up the Focusrite desk, did the release of the BrainWorks Focusrite channel bring you some joy?
I have not tried it. I saw it and I have not tried it. So I don't know. But let me just say this. The Focusrite that I work on when I work at Oceanway / United is highly modified. That thing ain't anything but stock. All the chips were changed. We're actually even using an SSL chip at one place inside the console. It's in an SSL console. So that's not a stock Focusrite. Really beefed up.
Wow.
The
Okay,
frequencies on the equalizer are even different. I even changed.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which
I
explains
even changed the frequencies because. What?
No, I was just going to say it explains the lack of Focusrite stuff in your big stack of gear. Not because obviously you didn't need it while you were there, but it's not like you could replace it with a couple of channels anyway.
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing about the Focusrite, at least that one, is it was a little bit neutral sounding, which is like what I kind of wanted because I wanted to be able to go back to the guy's question earlier. I wanted to be able to inject when I wanted the clarity and when I wanted the color. And I didn't want that to get in the way.
Right. At the console level.
Yeah, I mean, back then, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right or wrong.
Awesome. Okay, did that one count, or was that like a 0.5?
All right, one more.
Bring us another one.
All right, last one. What is your go-to? What's your go-to for making vocals more present in a mix, and how do you treat thin vocals?
Did you say thin vocals?
Yeah, how do you treat thin vocals, and what's your go-to for making vocals more present? That's from Neil Hansforth.
Yeah, it's a weird thing about vocals because if I probably, being personal here for a moment, a real personal moment, not an egocentric moment, a personal moment, probably the thing I get the most compliments on is the vocal. And sometimes where I want to like kill myself, I'm like, well, I just worked for hours on X, Y, and Z, and no one's talking about that. It's always like the damn voice. The truth is, it's actually probably the best thing in the world because it is the most important thing and the loudest thing in the mix. But, sometimes you wish they'd compliment you on other things. That being said, I've used so much stuff on vocals, so many different ways, I can't begin to even start to answer that question. I've done it with every kind of compressor you can imagine, from Joe Meek to Neve to 1176 to Puig Child to NV2 to Lo-Fi. I mean, where do I start and stop? I mean, so many different things. To me, the vocal thing is so much a feel thing. So much a feel thing. And it's impossible, as different as humans are, to think that there's one that fits all. There is no one fits all. I've tried to find it. I can't find a one fits all. Now, will an LE2 always work? Probably. Will Fairchild always work? Probably. Will 1176 always work? Probably. But it's a vocal, man. It's like, that's the personality, that's the character. It's like, that's something that you just got to try stuff on until you find that magic.
I think for me personally, I have more luck using parallel stuff on the vocal, because whenever I'm processing the vocal directly, unless it really just needs it, it just calls for something, I've always miss something about the unprocessed vocals. So by blending in a couple of different parallel chains on it, I can end up with sort of a fader for presence and aggression and a fader for body, which is dealing with the thin vocal, but they're independent of the vocal itself. And I just find that a little bit easier to deal with in my own head, rather than like, I'm going to find the thing that's going to work, because usually like, yeah, okay, that worked there, but now it's messed something else up. So that's just I guess it's just the way my brain works on it.
I didn't answer the thin question. Quick tech. Hard to beat tube stuff for warming a vocal up. So that Puig tech or the Puig child definitely will help with that considerably, without a doubt. Of course, we're not talking about parallel distortions that you can add for character and, they're bringing certain things out. I will say that I'm a little nervous about all of us. The amount, how much people are putting into parallel compression makes me nervous. It's good, but it's also, it's got its problems. And I don't think that I think everyone's just parallel compressing like crazy, and in some ways it's kind of cheating.
It's probably all my fault, and I'm using less and less and less of it every single day. Like, it's crazy how little I'm actually using right now. But for years, it was it.
Shelley Yakis, all the way back to Belinda Carlisle. I learned it years ago at A&M, parallel compression from him. And Steve McMillan, they're the ones that taught me about parallel compression, or at least put that in my head. Because other guys we mentioned today earlier, my mentors, they didn't do parallel compression. Nobody was doing it. But it is a little bit cheating, like Cole's microphones and overheads. It's a little bit cheating. Well, like, once you put on a really good microphone where you can really hear what's going on, where you can really hear the phase, where you can really hear the distortions. It's a little bit cheating. I understand it's a color, but sometimes I think to myself, this is a little bit cheating.
Well, but is anything cheating? Is anything really cheating? Because you don't know. Someone listening,
it's cheating in terms of some. It's cheating in some of the going back to the earlier question of some of that clarity and detail. There's some cheating in there, because when you start bringing up that low floor level so much, you're not only are you not allowing things, you stop things being able to go down as well. You still have peak information. That's part of the reason why you use it.
Yeah.
But you start to destroy the down, because you can't get down to minus 90 where things are quiet, so that when you get a big jump, like in a movie, when the monster screams, you took away that. The monster screams, but he doesn't sound like he screamed, because there's so much, nothing is relative. There's nothing quiet.
Yeah, well, and it's back to your real power and perceived power. And the real power records, there's not a lot of compression anywhere. Parallel, really. Serial.
There's limiting, but not compression. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think about it sometimes. I'm not chopping it. I mean, guys, I own like whatever it is here, 80 compressors. I'm a compressor fanatic. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good or bad. I'm just saying sometimes I just think about it like, here, are we going in the right direction with all this parallel compression that everybody on every platform, I'll leave nameless, all the platforms that we know are all talking about their parallel compression as if they discovered it. I'm like, dude, that's like 15, 20 years old.
Yeah,
that's not new. And they're just slogging it on like crazy, because Pro Tools allows us, right?
Yeah.
It's limitless, how many channels. So I'm not so sure that it's good 100%. I think we need to think about what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I think with all of it, you really need to understand what you're doing. And so if you're compressing something directly, in very general terms, you're bringing the peak down, and that's what reduces the dynamic range. When you do it parallel, you're bringing the RMS up and leaving the peak alone, and that reduces the dynamic range, because basically you got to fit this gigantic thing through a smaller pipe to get it in the mix, and that's the deal. So you have to reduce its dynamic range, and obviously it colors and does all this other stuff along the way, but you've got to understand that. And like Jack's saying, if you lose the quiet completely, then the loud isn't loud. It's just always one level, and you can turn it up and down, but nothing's moving. The same way, if you crush it, it can't move up and down. So you can achieve the same zero dynamic range in lots of different ways, but you've got to understand what it is you're doing. And the difference to me is one of just the feel of it, where when I know I want something to feel a certain way, I've gotten better at getting there quicker with some parallel stuff than I am with the insert stuff, because I'm not as good on the insert stuff. But that's in practice as well.
The bottom line is, if the one thing that all of us have to worry about, our Achilles heel, all of us right now, is there's so much information to actually stop and ask a few questions. One, is it right or wrong, what I'm seeing in this YouTube video? And why? Why does this do this? So, okay, it's cool that Waves just gave me this free plugin that has all these micros, and there's all these people like making all these different things. Okay, here's how I do vocals. Here are all my settings. Oh, that's cool, but why? Why did you come to that conclusion? That's what matters. What's the why? Yeah. And when I drive in and I don't mean me, but any of us, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing, or I'm sitting at lunch or at dinner, or I'm someplace where I'm daydreaming about a record that I'm working on, or whatever it is. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What would be cool? How could I make it better? Just because so-and-so, who I think said, who's really great, does this and that, so what? That's what they do. But what can I do? How can I be creative? How can I be great? How can I be the guy? How can I learn how to be one of those guys that I think is great, that I want to aspire to? You know, what's the why?
Yeah.
Why do I do what I do? Not because it's what they said. Why do I do that? What does it do?
Yeah. And it's what's always a bit dangerous about these questions. I understand why they're asked, but like, well, what's your favorite for this? Because then you think like, well, great, now I'll just go use that. But you've got to unfortunately just put in the time and learn it and figure out what you like on stuff, because it's not as simple as saying, well, if I put this compressor on the vocal, it'll all be cool, because obviously the vocal is relying on everything else around it to work. And so you're going to shape everything to leave space for a vocal, but now you've got the wrong vocal for what you've done because somebody said use that compressor on the vocal, but that doesn't work for the way you hear things.
But the truth is, it's the journey. It has nothing to do with arriving. There's no arriving, first of all. You don't ever arrive. It's all about the journey. So if I would be sad if someone said, you use this on the voice, use this on the guitar, and then be like, oh, that's all? Well, that's no fun. Like, right. I want to figure it out. Yeah. That's the fun part, is the creativity of figuring out like what happens if I take, this compressor and then add another compressor and even another compressor. Well, you can't put three compressors together. I don't know who said I can't. Well, they said that on Posada's place. You can't do that. Well, I don't care what they said. I don't care how many hit records they had. I want to put three compressors together. And then I want to put a reverb. And then I want to put a flanger after it. That's what this is all about, is creativity.
Yeah. It's creating things that are new, because otherwise all the sound-alike stuff would actually be as popular as the thing it's trying to sound like. And that's the downfall of many label person, whatever, like, oh, Despacito is huge. Let's get one of those weird ethnic guitar things on every track.
Right.
It's done.
Or do what that guy did.
Yeah.
On that song. Who cares what he did? By the way, you don't know how those tracks came up.
Yeah.
You need to figure it out on your own.
Exactly. And copying it doesn't, it's not going to work.
We'll not do it.
It's like copying studios. There was a room at Hit Factory in New York that was to the millimeter. We talked about this last week with George. To the millimeter, a copy of, I think we decided it was Sunset or Sound Factory, whatever. But the room sounded nothing like it. It's the exact same materials to the millimeter.
I think George has a story wrong. I think what he's thinking of is Val Gray copied Sound Factory to record 1.
Right. And okay. Yeah. And then, so Hit Factory 3 is a different room. Yeah.
He would literally drive back and forth, and he was never able to get Sound Factory A, not B, A. He couldn't get A at record 1. He hired all the same people. They did all the same material. Couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Same down to the millimeter. I think that's a story George probably actually means.
So it's and this thing like compressing a vocal, you've got to make your own journey to get there. So it's great to have some tips, like to know where to start, because like the possibilities are so limitless now, where it used to be like, wow, I can afford one compressor, so that's the compressor I'm going to learn. Now you'll have 500. So, okay, great. Start with an 1176 style or a Fairchild style. But like I was saying before about learning the attack and the release time, you just got to sit there and do it. And do it with the vocal in a mix and say, well, if I speed up the release, oh, wow, now I'm hearing the breaths more and I'm hearing the releases of the words. Well, that's cool. Okay, let me slow down the release. Well, now it's actually so slow that I'm missing the beginnings of things because it's still clamped down. Like, unless you learn that, you can't go forward with it and create your own thing, and you'll never get anywhere copying other people's things. I know people who assisted amazing engineers and took meticulous notes and got gigs to make records and tried to make the record based on those notes, like doing a recall to track a piano because this is how that other person did it. And they didn't last through the record because they're not listening, because every piano is different, every piano player is different, every room is different, every song needs the piano to be a different thing. So it's good starting points, but you've got to just put in the time.
Years ago, I worked at Electric Lady on an album, and I was there for 4 months. It was the summer. And so I got to know the assistant, really well. We were together every day for 4 months. And he could tell my passion and love for the art of record making and everything that it is. And one night he said, he closed the door and he locked the door to the control room. He goes, okay, we're going to tell you something and I'm going to show you something. And you can't tell anybody. Here I am telling the world, so to speak. But it's because it's years later, right? He said, all of us assistant engineers meet in the subway at night. Every Wednesday night, only Wednesday nights. And we trade mix notes. And different mix notes have different value. So he said, for instance, Bob Clearmountain's mix of Bowie's Modern Love or Let's Dance has more. You can trade 2 mix notes of another person. I won't say their name.
At least
for
2.
one Bob Clearmountain.
Mm-hmm.
So you trade 2 of, and still big records. 2 of another real big record.
God, I love that.
This big record, because this one has more value, like baseball cards. And so he said, here they are. And he threw down 6 of them on the console. He goes, you can have these. And they were like big records, and they were mixed notes. And I never forgot that. And amazing. Then the last thing I'll say was Jason Carcinaro, who was a guy who we lost to cocaine, but a very, very talented engineer. And I remember being in the power station with him. And I said, how do you get that sound? He goes, I used a reverb. I used a Rev 9. I go, Rev 9? So this was a Yamaha reverb that Yamaha made. They made one called a Rev 7. And then they made one called a Rev 1. And he said, yeah, I just put output of the Rev 7 into the Rev 1. So that's a Rev 9. And that was, again, another moment was like, kaboom, my head blew up. Like, you can do anything. Who says you can't put 2 reverbs of one reverb into another reverb? And that's the game. That's the game. Yeah. That's what you want to choose.
And what's great is that, you can lament the fact that you can't go be an assistant at a studio because there aren't that many studios and whatever. But when you were, we talked about this 3.5 hours ago when we started, that when you worked at a studio, nights and weekends, you'd find a couple channels on the console they weren't using, and you'd put stuff through them, and you'd patch gear in, and you'd go nuts. And then, and you'd come in. I came in a couple of times at Record Plant, and the assistant had his feet up on the console with a bass plugged through it, checking out compressors, because he'd been there all night to do it. You don't have to stay up all night and come in on weekends to do it. You get to do it at home 24 hours a day at any time. So take that time and actually realize that you got to go to school. And unfortunately, you've got to school yourself because you've got to learn how to hear the stuff.
Okay, so let me say one sobering thing to that. Sobering thing to all of this. Sobering thing to what we're talking about right now. If you have to listen to us to do that, you're not in the right business. Get out. This has to be an obsession. It has to be the other woman. I'm talking about from a man's standpoint, from me personally. It has to be the other woman. You have to be obsessed. You have to think about it all the time. You have to want it. You have to have tenacity. You don't want it? Go sell shoes. Just do something else. You will not have a happy life. You have to do this because there is nothing else you want to do. And you want to be in there trying things. And you can't wait to get in and screw around with the shit you have, whether it's your Alesis compressor with whatever microphone, with your Radio Shack mixer, whatever the hell it is. You don't want to do it. You're not self-driven. You don't have the internal pilot light that's on. You shouldn't be in this, because there are a lot of people that are exactly what I'm saying right now, and you will never beat them out. You'll never get your dream. You'll never get your goals. You'll never realize it.
Yeah.
Because there are other people that are obsessed. You got to be obsessed. But you have to want it internally because you want it. I'm a Spanish. In the Spanish language, they say, if no tengas gana. Gana is like drive, internal drive. You want it. You're not that way? Forget it. I'm telling you, you won't be happy.
And on that note, I think we're done.
All right.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Jack. And also, I've just checked my email, and I would like to confirm that next week will be Mr. Tony Maserati. So
Amazing.
we do have a guest for next week. So it's going to be a hell of a hard act to follow. But
I know Maserati will talk about what you were sort of saying and what I was sort of saying, but more you. Practice.
Yeah.
Maserati always talks about practice. He goes in and he practices. That's kind of what we're talking about. That's his version.
And one of these days he'll practice enough that, that kid's going to make it, I'm sure. All right.
I've walked out of a studio with him. I've walked out of the studio at 3 a.m. with him. And him in one room, me in another room. He's got the drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No question. No
All
question.
right, guys.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Jack, thank you
so much. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody, sticking with us. I think we've set a new land speed record at 4 hours and 3 minutes. So
there it is.
There you go. I'm never going to sleep again.
You got it. George is going to be upset.